Okay, ZBA, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines are open. Go for it.
Thank you, Matt. Welcome everyone to the Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals. For September 26, 2023, we have a busy evening this evening, so we're going to get right into first scheduled hearing. I'll read it into the record. The applicant is Daniel and Pernilla Ammon at 33, 35, and 37 Sanders Beach Road, East Hampton, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-56-1-11 and 12 and 14.2. The size and location is 70,986 square feet, combined total at 33, 35, and 37 Sammy's Beach Road in East Hampton. The description is to demolish the improvements on 3 single and separate properties, merge the properties, and construct a 4,652 square foot 1- and 2-story residence with basement 600 square feet, detached garage, sanitary system, pedestrian access to the beach, and driveway on a parcel of land containing barrier, dunes, secondary dunes, beach vegetation, and location within the town's jurisdiction over tidal wetlands. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420, variances from 255-440, coastal setbacks, and 255-375, harbor protection overlay district of the town code, and any other relief necessary. Variances of 14 feet and 25.3 feet are required to construct the residence and decking approximately 86 feet and 74.7 feet respectively from the primary dune crest where a 100-foot setback is required, and a 47-foot variance is required to install a sanitary system approximately 153 feet from tidal wetlands where 200-foot setbacks is required. The zoning district is A2 residential VE flood zone, elevation 10, X flood zone, and AE flood zone elevation. The secret class is type 2. Council, do we have proper affidavit in service and posting?
I've reviewed the affidavit of notice and posting. Everything appears to be in order and the board has jurisdiction over this application. Within the past hour, we did receive an email claiming an adjacent property owner that was not noticed. So we are going to ask that we leave the record open regardless of how the hearing goes, just in case they are correct about that and they have an opportunity to respond as well. But it does appear that the notice was sufficient.
Thank you. So this is my report this evening. I was there today and took some photos. This is the first property, which is 33, right? This is 33. Next, I'll take well, Tyler, you can go next. So this is the first posting that I said. There's supposed to be 3 postings. I only saw 2.
There were 3 postings.
There were 3, but I figured that storm probably took one away.
We posted yesterday.
I look for it today. I didn't see it. It was well posted otherwise. I attest to that. So next, Tyler. And that's the second posting. That's on 37. So now I take a photo. This is a photo east on Simmons Beach Road. This is a photo looking south across that 3 Mile Harbor. And again, southwest 3 Mile Harbor. So this is the first property, number 33, and I'll take a walk into that. Basically, my objective in my photos here is to show you the state of these properties. They're pretty well in their natural state, I would suggest. So Tyler, I just want to go ahead and take a next photo, taking a look at some of the vegetation. And again, scanning over to the east of this residence, you can see the dune in front of us and some of the vegetation. This is the garage. This is the garage that's on the middle lot, I believe, right? So, members, this is the garage. The survey basically where the CHA line is coming through. Next. Again, taking a look at some of the vegetation, looking into the property. This is looking, scanning at the house to the west. And that's the property next door to the, no, that's to the west as well. Next. Looking at the residence. So this is the middle property. This is the garage. Our next. Again, taking a look down, you can see the breeze grasses, the vegetation, natural vegetation. Moving on here. Next. Again, taking a look at the house. This is up. That's the house in the middle of close to the dune. Next. And just scanning around, taking a look at the state of the property. Next. Again, another scan. Yep, and this is the side of the property. This is the one with the garage, the entrance down below the house. Would say a garage? I wouldn't say, but entrance. So this is the third property to the east, number 37. Taking good. All three of these properties are pretty pristine vegetation, natural vegetation. Again, getting a sense of the oak trees and whatnot. Again, go ahead, Tyler. That's a photo of the house on 37. Again, now beyond these houses is Gardner's Bay. Taking a look at the dune, there's a dune as well here. Thanks. All right, now I'm going to be walking out towards the back. I didn't walk. I walked back, but I'm going to take a picture of all three houses from the dune, and of course of the dune you'll see, so you can get a sense of that. This is on the deck, looking east, taking a look more towards the north, and looking at the dunes. Quite spectacular. Looking towards the west. Again, a little scan out. This is more towards the west. You can see the coastline. That's the houses. As you see, the three houses, I'm going to scan and take a panoramic of it. Next. There's the three houses. So you get a sense of what the character of the neighborhood is in its present state. And that's the houses to the east. And some of these houses have been renovated recently or whatnot, so you can see. I think that's the last photo. And you have the, correct? How are you, Rick?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Richard Whalen from Whalen Fowler PLLC, here representing the applicants. The applicants who are here tonight are Daniel and Pernilla Ammon. They've owned the property here for more than 20 years. If there are any questions of an architectural nature, Andrew Berman, who's the architect, is also here tonight as my associate, Matty Norvillos. There have been a number of letters or emails that have come in over the last couple of days, most of them today, and apparently even some late this afternoon. So I haven't seen or reviewed all of those. I've reviewed some of them. What I have seen includes the correspondence you received includes numerous errors and misstatements about the application. I don't think the people who are the objectors know or understand what we're actually proposing, but the emails that I've seen contain gross factual errors. So what I'm going to ask that you do is listen to my presentation, and I'm going to tell what the project actually involves, and hopefully you'll make an objective decision based upon that. Because again, if you look at what the objectors have written from what I've seen, it's completely off base. So one other thing I should mention, because Jameson mentioned to me, I guess the trustees sent an email at the end of the day saying that they weren't notified. Just to be clear, the town code requires that you notify adjacent property owners as shown on the Suffolk County tax map. I don't know what property the trustees are claiming to own. Maybe they claim to own the beach at Sammy's Beach. They don't, as far as we're concerned, but they don't own anything that is on the tax map that adjoins our property. They do own 3 Mile Harbor, and we do own the wetland lots on the south side of Sammy's Beach Road, but we're not proposing anything on those lots. So frankly, if the trustees understand what the project's all about, I'm not worried about their comments. So, if the board wants to leave the record open for the trustees to comment, subject to our response, we don't have a problem with that. But there's no failure of notice in regard to the application. So an overview of the project. The existing property consists of 3 lots. Each of them has an existing house. They go back, at least 2 of the 3 homes, I think all 3, although the eastern one was enlarged, go back to before 1954. All of the wetlands, let me put it to you this way. If you were to recreate what is on the property today with the current setbacks and so forth and the 3 lots, you would need between 19 and 21 variances. That's how many nonconformities are on our property today. Each house and each deck is nonconforming to the dune setback, and there's 3 houses with 3 decks. The septic system for each house is nonconforming to the wetlands on 3 Mile Harbor on the other side of Sammy's Beach Road. There are side yard setback variances both within side yard setback nonconformities, both between the lots and also to the adjacent neighbors on either side. At least 2 perimeter variances, maybe 4 of those. None of the homes comply with FEMA regulations today, and one of the detached garages doesn't meet the wetland setback on the other side of the property. We're seeking 3 variances. Under the code, we're required to seek these variances, but none of them is a real variance. We are moving the homes on the new proposed house on the property, and I'll get into it size in a moment, will be moved back between 35 and 50 feet compared to the existing homes and decks on the property. So our overall retreat is by any measurement more than 35 feet from the dune crest. We're also going to be meeting the wetland setback from the other side of 3 Mile Harbor Road. The nearest structure on the property to the wetlands would be the detached garage. That's 108 feet from the wetlands. The house is about 119 or 120 feet from the wetlands. And of course, we're putting in a new IA system, septic system, that will be located more than 150 feet from the wetlands associated with 3 Mile Harbor and well over 200 feet from Gardner's Bay. So the 2 setback variances from the dunes, there's a setback variance for the new house and for the new decking associated with the house. But again, bear in mind, those represent a substantial retreat from the existing homes and decks with respect to the primary dune. And the septic system, again, requires a variance because it's not 200 feet from the 3 Mile Harbor wetlands, but it's a vast improvement over what exists right now. 2 of the 3 septic systems, as far as we know, don't even have cesspools. So we're proposing to consolidate the 3 lots into 1, build 1 house. The proposed GFA of the new house is 4,652 square feet. Our overall lot, not zoning lot area, but the overall lot exceeds an acre in size. We all know from East Hampton that a 4,652 square foot house is not all that big in the current environment. It's obviously less than we're allowed under zoning, and we understand that there are obviously environmental constraints. It's an increase over the cumulative GFA of the existing homes by 780 square feet. Other than the fact that the applicants get a modern house, that's the gross floor area increase, net increase that they will obtain over the 3 homes, 780 square feet. The number of bedrooms on the property will decrease from 7 to 5. I mentioned the new IA system that will be installed more than 150 feet from the wetlands. The project benefits substantial increases in the dune setbacks. Existing clearing on the property is 11,761 square feet. The proposed clearing when we're done is a little over 9,000 square feet. That's a total reduction of 2,729 square feet, or based on the existing clearing, an overall reduction of 23.2%. So close to a 1/4 reduction in the clearing of the property when we're done. Now, I understand this comes up in some of the objective statements. There'll be interim clearing because we have to clear the land where the new house will go. So you have to clear that and be able to retreat. All of the existing homes and decks will be removed. When those houses and decks are removed, that is cleared area. We're going to revegetate that. We're not doing anything that is in terms of all the work that's being proposed to be done is all landward of those existing homes and decks. So there's no clearing, from those houses towards Gardner's Bay, except for the removal of those structures themselves. We also have 3 beach access ways, paths, that'll be reduced to 1. Building coverage, this is the only other thing on the property that actually increases. Building coverage, that's the footprint of the house and the proposed detached garage, will increase from 4,177 square feet to 5,098 square feet. That's an increase of 921 square feet. So building coverage goes up by about 900 square feet. Gross floor area goes up by 780 square feet, but the total coverage, total lot coverage, all structures, is reduced by about 2,600 square feet. That number, total lot coverage, will decline from 11,522 to 8,912. Remember, we have 3 driveways and parking areas, and those obviously will be consolidated into just 1 driveway. All that area would be revegetated. Most of the revegetation, well, there's 2 areas to be revegetated. Obviously where the existing homes and decks are, which is on the seaward side of the property. On the bay side of the property where we take out the driveways and so forth, remember we have to extricate all the demolition materials as we demolish those houses. On the Sammy's Beach side, that also will have to be revegetated. That's in the applicant's interest on both sides. They don't want to look at bare dirt or sand, not that you'd allow that between themselves and the bay, but also they want to be able to screen themselves from Sammy's Beach Road, and they intend to do that with natural vegetation. I also already noted that the total number of bedrooms, existing homes versus the proposed house will decrease from 7 to 5. We're eliminating side yard and pyramid law nonconformities. FEMA compliance, the new house will be located entirely out of the flood zone. FEMA flood zone is in flood zone X, which of course is not a flood zone. In terms of mitigation, the planning department has proposed a scenic easement over the dune land and up to 50 feet landward from the dune crest, which is something we would agree to. We would also agree, just throwing that out there if you're interested, we would also agree to a scenic and conservation easement over the wetland parcels on the 3 mile harbor side of Sammy's Beach Road. Those are primarily wetlands, but you know, theoretically somebody could try to do something with them. So we would offer a scenic easement over those as well. I mentioned the 3 variances that we need. And I mentioned that there are total elimination of as many as 21 different nonconformities on the property. With respect to those variances, there are area variance standard you're familiar with. Will there be an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood? Again, the house will be larger in terms of GFA than 700 by 780 square feet than the cumulative total of the existing houses. But we'll have gone from 3 homes to 1 home. We'll reduce the number of bedrooms on the property. We'll reduce the overall clearing on the property substantially. We'll reduce the total coverage of structures on the property substantially. And of course, we'll be installing a vastly improved septic system. So both in terms of neighborhood character, there's no, in our view, there's no, and of course that the home itself meets all dimensional requirements, pyramid law, setbacks, and so forth. As I understand it, both the immediately adjoining neighbors on the east and west support the project. Whether the project is feasible without a variance, no. I want to mention, and I think you understand this, and Brian does mention this in his technical analysis memo, but the reason that we need setback variances for the deck and the house itself are because we're merging the lot, and because we now make a lot that's over 30,000 square feet, the required dune setback goes from 75 feet to 100 feet. If that jump didn't occur, if we were still subject to the 75 foot setback that applies to the existing lots, we would actually have a conforming house and deck. In terms of potential adverse environmental impacts on the community, again, we're improving the coastal setbacks by between 35 and 50 feet. We're reducing total coverage. We're reducing total clearing. We're greatly improving the septic system. And we're offering scenic easements over sensitive properties, that are sensitive areas of the property. That's all I have. I mean, I reserve the right to respond to their comments by some of the neighbors or some of the objectors. Again, it's hard to respond to all that right now because so much was received today, but from what I've seen, there really aren't any substantive objections to the project.
I'll have some questions, but I'll turn it over to board members first if anybody has any questions.
Well, I'll start with, do we have a building protocol that's available for us to analyze to see how the property would be, how we would address this construction? You talked about the removal of houses out in certain areas. We want to know what kind of constrictions we had on movement of heavy equipment. We want to know where that material is going to be removed to. We'd like to see what would happen when we start new construction. What is the plan? What is the exact building protocol? Looking for those answers.
So we can provide a building protocol. I forgot to mention, actually, the planning department, TAM, also recommends that you see really a demolition protocol. One of the things, so we're glad to do that. We'll provide we'll provide a revegetation plan, because the one that we gave you is very rudimentary. You need better than that. We're not, right now, 72%, I think about 72% of the area landward of the dune crest, not the whole property, but landward of the dune crest, is shown on our plan to be cleared as part of the demolition and removal. It's pretty clear on looking at it, we can tighten that up. So we intend to do that. So we'll show you a revegetation plan with a demolition plan.
But I'd like to see a segmented vegetation plan, if you will. Once you demo, we'd like, depending on the time of year, but we want to see then, you're gonna have to do a limiting fence to deal with your demo.
Yeah.
But after the demo, I'd like to see the limiting fence move, because I don't want that area to be used for construction activities. So we want to keep activities on.
I think the main thing is we do have to figure out where we're putting construction vehicles. That's the main constraint, other than removing the demolition materials. But from the Ammons point of view, the less they remove in terms of vegetation between the project site and Sammy's Beach Road, the less they have to revegetate. Because when they're all said and done, other than that one driveway, they want to be screened on the roadside. So what you want, I think, is what we want. But anyway, we'll give you a revegetation plan, a staged demolition plan, a construction protocol. I'm missing something there.
Grading plan.
Grading plan.
I was gonna bring up the grading plan, that's.
All this is work, for.
So what we have, and the reason I like to look for a grading plan is, we like to, you have dunes that are meandering on these properties, and I think the character of those dunes should be tried to maintain as much as possible in your final grading.
Yeah, let me make this clear. I want to make this clear for people who are here in the audience tonight too. Seaward of the existing homes, which we are going to demolish and remove, we're not touching anything other than we're going to consolidate the 3 beach acts of Hampton into one. So in terms of the dune land, Mr. Chairman, that Chairman is referring to, we're not touching the dune. We're going to restore, we're going to expand that dune.
There are dunes before, on the landward side of the houses, there are dunes that are existing that have been there for a very, very long time, right? Some of those dunes are going to be altered because of the construction. But where we're not doing, I want to maintain the character of that habitat and dunes as much as possible.
Understood.
Can you comment on the status of the DEC application?
We have a DEC application pending. We basically put it in abeyance, pending the outcome of your decision. We will need a variance from the DEC because we are building on the seaward side of the CHA line. It's impossible, as you can tell from the survey, it's impossible to build a house on the property between the CHA line and the road. And even if we were trying to do so, we would need major wetland variances because we'd be too close to Fremont Harbor.
I thought there was some indication that they were opposing.
They wanted us to try to move back to the 100-foot their view basically was to try to move as far back as possible on the property. That would put us in, first of all, it would put us at odds with the town's 100-foot wetland setback, and would also leave no room between the house and the road. So the house would be on top of the road. So we still have to deal with the DEC. That application remains pending.
So this application of your part now is a balancing act between whether you do closer to the dune, closer to the wetlands.
Yes.
And you've made this choice here based on what you think is the least egregious move on behalf of the new construction.
Yeah, the house right now is 100, I think in the TAM, the house is 119 feet from the wetlands. The garage is 108 feet. So, could you go to 100 feet? I suppose. But it's not much more of a difference, and that's not something that it's not something the Ammons want to do is put the house on top of the road. So this is really where they want to position things. We're moving as far back from DEC's point of view. we feel we're moving as far back from the coast as is reasonable.
Rick, can you address the character of the neighborhood?
So Sandy's Beach began to be developed actually in the early 1950s, about the same time that most of these homes were built. A lot of the houses are older. I've dealt with a couple. There's been a recent, the Donovan House, second to last at the end of the street, was rebuilt a few years ago. Going back when I was the zoning board attorney in the 1990s, there was a house at the western end to the west of it. I'm not sure, it might be the Weeder House today, where the zoning board actually, when I was the attorney, the application came in to build a second story and the zoning board denied it for aesthetic reasons. I said, I'm not sure this is going to hold up, and it didn't. And the zoning board denial was overturned in Article 78. So there's been some redevelopment. Most of the homes tend to be shingled and more traditional. Obviously, this is a different style. It's a more modernistic house, but there's no architectural review here. And if you look at the architectural drawings, the architectural plans, I don't think the house really stands out. It's relatively low, and I think it will fit in, and we're going to be well screening it as well.
The house, though, in terms of the size of the individual house, even though you have more land now that you combine them, is much larger than the neighboring properties. The houses on neighboring properties.
Right. But we'll also have a much larger lot. I mean, many of the lots, our original lots, the two western lots are 50 feet wide, and I think the eastern lot is 100 feet wide. A lot of the properties on Sandy Beach Road, and we're talking, of course, on the north side, the bay side, a lot of them are 100 feet wide. Are 50 feet wide. So they're going to get smaller houses. We're combining into a lot now that will be 200 feet wide, an acre in total, total land area. So we get a bigger house. We're well within our allowed GFA. We're not, because there's a comment in the technical analysis memo that, normally the applicant shouldn't, on environmentally sensitive property, shouldn't be able to build up to the parameters of the zoning. Well, we're not. We're below allowed GFA by a decent amount. We're below allowed building coverage. We're reducing total building coverage. So we're not pushing the envelope.
I have the same issue. Well, with the merger, okay, you're gonna merge into one lot or you're proposing to. And after that, is that it? Or you wouldn't be able to subdivide in the future and do anything?
Yeah, well, I think we're in A2 zone. I can't remember now. I think it's zone A2. So even the combined lot will not be conforming to zoning, and the house would straddle the original 3 lines. So in other words, we wouldn't even give you a lot. We wouldn't even give you a large lot easement because we would need a substantial variance to ever divide in the future. We'd have to knock the house down. So once this becomes one lot, it's going to be one lot pretty much forever.
If as you're saying, the neighborhood is 100-foot wide lots and small houses, isn't putting a big house in a change in the neighborhood?
That depends on whether you think it's better to have one house versus 3 houses. All the lots are non-conforming. In fact, all the lots are grossly non-conforming because if we're in a 2-acre zone and we've got 2 50-foot wide lots and 100-foot wide, the lot is becoming more conforming. And all of the improvements on the lots are becoming, as I said, greatly more non-conforming. You would need at least 19 variances to recreate what we have today. So we're eliminating every one of those non-conformities. So I think, that's the way I would look at it. It's a bigger house because it's on one lot. Let me just say this. Each of the homes on these 3 lots could be enlarged without variances. The zoning setback from the dune crest is 50 feet if you build on the landward side of a house. And if you build on the landward side of each of these homes, we're more than 50 feet from the dune crest. And if we limit that addition to an increase of no more than 25% of the footprint of the house, we don't need a CHA variance. We only need a CHA permit because that's a non-major addition under the DC's regulations. So if we squeeze it sideways to meet the side yard setbacks, build on the landward side, we could probably add 800 square feet of floor area to those 3 houses. They'd have to be built individually, but you could do it. So that's the same net result as what we're doing, except that we're doing it in one house.
Any other questions?
I just want to say, we've already talked about the building protocol. It's obvious that we're concerned about it. Any building protocol that comes up should be very specific about exactly what you think the parameters are of the work that's going on. A lot that's sensitive for us to take this seriously, this application. I think that's extremely critical. Collateral damage happens on these lots all the time. There's initial statements. So a building protocol that merely says you're going to be careful won't be enough. There'll have to be a very specifically a list of things that we can look at and say, okay, I see that it's stage 1, stage 2, stage 5. I can see what's going on. Because if it's not clearly defined, this is much too sensitive a lot for us to move forward. Just wanted to make sure.
The architect, Andrew Berman, is here, so I presume that Andrew's taking notes.
I'm just saying that this is something, and I'm sure the architect has experience doing this before. These lots are more sensitive than a lot of lots, you know this, Rick.
Yes.
And that's what we're always looking for. In this particular case, especially based on a lot of the photos that we saw being at the site, photos from the chairman, we see just how sensitive this lot is to potential damage. So the building protocol for me is one of the critical parts of taking this application to the next level.
So we'll try to do a good job on that and follow, the comments that you just made.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. I
The
know.
house gonna be,
I'm sorry.
total height of the house gonna be,
That is a question for Andrew, actually.
okay.
You got to stand up here, Andrew.
John, can you pull up the view from the water? Yes.
17, the last photo.
We'll blow that up a little bit so we can see that.
The outline up.
So Rick, do you want to just address this relative to the existing houses to the north?
So those outlines that you see, like particularly on the left-hand side, that's the 1 2-story house. That's the easternmost house on the property. That's the largest house. And then they're a little bit overlapped by the proposed new house, but the other 2 homes are shown to the right. Also an outline view. Andrew, do you know the height?
It was 25 feet above natural grade.
Okay, so which flat roof maximum height, 25 feet? Thank you.
Hi there.
Introduce yourself.
Sure thing. I'm Dan Hammond, owner of the 3 properties, along with my wife Pranilla, who's
Are
here.
you an attorney?
I'm not an attorney. Do I look like one?
No. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
Yes, I do. Thank you. I don't want to take a whole lot of time here, but I wanted to just add a couple additional comments. I appreciate the board's time. As Rick mentioned, we've been residents of Sammy's Beach Road for 20 years. Our kids have grown up there. Our goal is to build this house to retire there. When we bought the first property here and then the subsequent 2 properties, and there's some folks here who have been residents of the area for a long time. They will likely remember that these were pretty suburbanized lots in terms of the way the houses were. There was a lot of parking areas and landscaping, sort of non-native landscaping and so on. And over the time that we've owned the lots, we've actually put quite a bit of effort into returning them to a more natural state. And you can see that, you saw it up there in your visit. We removed a lot of walkways, we removed parking spaces, we planted a lot of bayberry, a lot of other native plantings there. And so the state that the properties are in today are a function of the effort that we've put into them and how we want them to look like, as they are today, and how we want the property to look like after we finish the proposed project here. Our goal is to, as we go through this, is to have the absolute minimum disturbance to what is there today. We've spent a lot of time in locating the house to preserve as many of especially the larger trees, and in particular the cedars and so on that are down, you saw up and down each side of the property that are there. And I think as we develop the more detailed revegetation plan, we can highlight very clearly how much of the existing landscaping, how much of the existing native planting can be preserved, particularly that, as you noticed along the road there as well, there's already a lot of existing screening there, and our goal is to preserve all of that. There's no reason that can't all stay.
very naturalized screening all.
Yeah, exactly. And so we absolutely want to preserve all of that there. You know, in putting this proposal together, we've tried to be as thoughtful as possible about creating something that can stand the test of the next, you know, several decades there. That's why we want to get the houses out of the floodplain and into the X zone, back from, you know, off the dune crest where they're all sitting right up there today, so we can, you know, replant, revegetate that dune crest and have it look like, just as you saw, east and west in those photos there. You know, the sum total, you know, everything that's not the house, you know, we want to be back to natural dunescape, and you know, planning that and nurturing that over time, just as we have to get the properties into the state that they're there today. So, you know, that's really what I wanted to share, which is we've created a lot of what you saw there when you went up there today in terms of the natural, you know, landscaping around the houses. It was very much more sort of suburban lot and grass and, you know, paving and things like that we've taken out. And it's our goal to preserve as much of that as possible, get the houses off the dune, get them out of the floodplain, build something that has a much smaller footprint that's pulled in from the side lots. I mean, the house to the east is right over and actually, you know, is right on the lot line in terms of the eastern edge of that house. You know, it's you know, zero to the lot line there. Similarly, the house to the west is right on the lot line to that side. So bringing it in much more into the center, back off the dune crest, much more concentrated footprint, and a structure that, you know, that is, you know, out of the floodplain and something that, you know, can endure there, you know, far into the future. And we're trying to do that as in responsible a way as we can. And we're prepared to put all the effort in to make sure that the execution plan, to your point, is as tight as possible, really controls that, and just does the right thing to ensure that. So we're prepared to put the time and effort in.
You've been there 20 years, and some of us are part of that environment too. In 3 Mile Harbor, you'll often see me paddleboarding in there. I look across at that, and that's one of the most beautiful vistas there is. And maintaining that vista, the character of the neighborhood, I think is critical, and protecting it. It really is a special place.
And
it's undeniable. So.
Yeah, and that's why we bought there in the first place. That's why we've been there since, and that's why we want to make the investment to put something in place that really does right by it for the future.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you. I think we'll turn
Thanks.
it over to Brian Frank.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, Brian Frank, Chief Environmental Analyst for Town of East Hampton.
Brian, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but.
I do. But before I get started, and you probably have already figured this out from your request to Tyler earlier, the documents that were referenced in the TAM is those that were the most pertinent to the application, the survey, the elevation plans, those that zoning analysis that's all available tonight. If the board members want any of that up on the screen, just say so. I'm happy to provide it. I wanted to switch over to the aerial view from 2023 just to provide a little bit of I guess texture is the right word to discuss the applications. So the properties that are subject in the application are bordered in blue on the screen there. They are from left to right, 33, 35, and 37 Sammy's Beach Road. 33 is improved with about a 782 square foot one-story house with a 264 square foot detached garage. 35 has a 664 square foot one-story house and a 308 square foot garage. And 37 Sammy's Beach has about 2,400 square foot 1- and 2-story house with the garage underneath. Those all come from the architect's calculations for the applications. The properties were acquired by the current owner at various times between 2003 and 2011. This is all on the north side of Sammy's Beach Road, as Rick had mentioned in his presentation, and it was assumed by the survey and also the pattern of ownership in that area, that the owners also owned the corresponding lots on the south side of Sammy's Beach Road, which for a long time was fairly common, whether those lots on the south side were ever intended to be building lots or to protect the view shed to 3 Mile Harbor or provide some type of pedestrian access to the harbor. I think depends on who you ask, but it's not uncommon to see the owner of a north side of on Sammy's Beach own the opposite lot on the south side, and that's confirmed that that's the case tonight. All of the residences, as Rick had mentioned, are currently non-compliant with natural resource setbacks, side yard pyramid setbacks, and the foundation specifications for the FEMA flood zone. They do meet the first floor elevation of the FEMA zones, but the foundations don't meet the pass through the flood vents that might be more of a minor point of might be an easy retrofit. And in the planning department's analysis, well, I'll back up a second. I don't think anybody's debating the environmental sensitivity of the area. So we know that the area is in critical environmental areas, scenic areas of statewide significance. None of that seems to be really of debate, so I don't really want to spend any time on that in the interest of time. And the way the planning department framed the application for the board is there were really two very large issues for the board's concern. One is identifying the appropriate coastal setback for the new development, and the other is identifying the appropriate scale of development. And the board is obviously dialed in on that. That was pretty obvious from Member Deline and Member McGivern and Member Johann's questions to Rick about the character of the neighborhood, which is a qualitative, more of a qualitative determination than the setback, which is more quantitative. So what is the right setback for construction on this lot? As the TAM noted and was reiterated by Rick, the setbacks were increased on outer bays to 75 feet around 2007 in a major overhaul of the town's coastal regulations at that time. A 75-foot setback is required for lots less than 30,000 square feet. A 100-foot setback is required for lots greater than 30,000 square feet. So, and there is a minor correction I'd like to make in the TAM. Those setbacks come from the total lot area, not the lot area minus the dune crest, as most other zoning parameters do, for the obvious reasons that if a property is eroding, you would actually, it would be counterintuitive to give a property that would be eroding and losing lot area a lesser setback as a result of that erosion. And that's why for other lot calculations, you would exclude the land seaward of the dune crest, but for coastal setbacks, bluff or dune crest setbacks, you do not. So the two westernmost lots have a lot area of about 17,000 and change square feet. That subjects them to the 75-foot coastal setback. The eastern lot has a lot area of about 35,000 square feet, and therefore it is currently subject to the 100-foot setback. So yes, it's correct that at least part of the reason for the 100-foot setback is the merger of the lots, but at least one of the three lots it is regulated by that setback now. So yeah, the TAM noted the combined lot area of 39,686 square feet. That is kind of the net lot area, if you would. The actual lot area of the combined three lots is 70,986 square feet. The houses are set back right now. The houses and decks the houses are about anywhere between 45 and 54 feet from the dune crest. With the decks, that setback is reduced to anywhere from 40 to 25 foot, a 25-foot setback to the dune crest. The DEC has recommended adherence to the town's 100-foot dune crest setback, and the planning department appreciates the DEC's recognition of the town zoning code. But I do think it's also in completeness, it's important for the board, for the board to recognize that CHA is a singular regulatory program. It's a coastal erosion hazard area program, and has the luxury or the limitation of just looking at coastal setback issues from the dune, from the CHA line, however you want to characterize it. The zoning board's jurisdiction is broader, and its considerations are broader because it does include the tidal wetlands on the south side of the road, which the CHA program did not. That would be out of their jurisdiction, and the special permit standards of 540 and 550 of the town code. So the zoning board has a broader suite of considerations in evaluating this application than only the distance from the dune crest. And the distance from the dune crest is important. There's been some discussion about the accretion in this area, and that's correct. The aerials that were used to identify the linear distance of beach accretion are in your file. They were made scalable so that you could, so anybody could really take a look at that and make their own measurements. The ones I have in there are estimates. And it is important to recognize that this has been an accreting area and a stable area, and we hope it stays that way for a very, very long time. But coastal areas are dynamic, and for better or for worse, they're prone to rapid and dramatic changes. They're prone to changes in pattern as a result of things that happen offshore or even a single storm. And they are by nature dynamic. Sea level is rising. It's rising at a more rapid rate than had been forecasted even as recently as 5 years ago. The frequency and intensity, or at least the intensity of storms, has kind of been demonstrated in that timeline as well. So it's important to always respect the potential severity and to never be cavalier about coastal setbacks. That being said, the planning department would discourage any reduction from the 100-foot wetland setback to the south. I think if the wetlands were farther away, I think the planning department would most likely make a much stronger recommendation to adhere to that 100-foot setback. And if you want to strike a greater balance by increasing the dune crest setback, I'd encourage you to not do that at the expense of the tidal wetland setbacks for structures. As Rick had mentioned, I think it came from the TAM, the house is 119 now. The garage is about 108, 106, and no structure should be located less than 100 feet from the wetlands.
And that goes for the location of the septic system as well?
The sanitary system, I can go back to the survey if you'd like. I do think the sanitary system is probably in the optimum location. You could meet the 200-foot wetland setback to the south by pushing it farther north, which puts it into the velocity zone. It puts it in an area of, the farther north you go, the more vulnerable it is. A 25% variance for a new sanitary system is at least rational to consider. You could push it farther to the north. You're pushing it into a more volatile area of the coastline if you do that, and deeper into the dune crest setbacks don't apply to sanitary systems, but there's still a rational basis for staying away from a potentially volatile feature in the future. I think there's already been enough there's been a lot of discussion about the proposed gross floor area relative to what's there now, how much of an increase it is, what's the change in coverage, what's the change in total coverage. And the character of the neighborhood is a very qualitative determination for the zoning board. Obviously, this application is going to change the character of the neighborhood, and there are pros and cons to that. You're eliminating a greater degree of nonconformity from the dune crest. You are creating a residence that's going to be conspicuously larger than the development on either side, and that is also a reason to have a certain respect for that setback from the street, not only to protect the wetlands. This is the narrowest portion of Sammy's Beach. There's no place on the peninsula where the wetlands are closer to the edge of the road than just south of these properties. And I do think a retention of the vegetation that's there now is integral to protecting the character of the neighborhood in any redevelopment. If you were to knock a significant amount of square footage off the size of this house, I think that would still be the case. The vegetation on this lot right now is a combination of dune land and successional species. You have areas that do have beach grass, coastal panic grass, large areas of eastern prickly pear. Sammy's Beach has some of the highest concentration of eastern prickly pear in town. It's not a common plant in East Hampton. It's not listed as rare or special concern, but it's not common. It's unique to the area. And then as you go farther south, there may be a couple of olives here and there, but by and large, the property is undisturbed. There are pretty mature eastern red cedars, which are obviously native, adapted to these environmental conditions, which is not always the case with cedars that are grown in inland nurseries. There's a certain number of oaks there. The cedars also provide a certain amount of year-round screening. So the planning department would strongly encourage the applicant to explore a single point, as part of the demolition, as part of the construction protocol that the zoning board obviously would like to see too. I would like to encourage the applicant to explore using a single point for demolition and construction to retain as much of that vegetation on the south side of the properties as is possible. The revegetation plan that was submitted with the application is all native, but it probably can be simplified to be a better representation of the dune land in the area, a mix of beach grass and clusters of shrubs. Experience has shown that retaining the dune land soils here is really integral to a diverse dune land habitat. There is a relationship between the vegetation that grows on the dunes and the mycorrhizal fungi that grow in the sand within the dunes. And I've seen areas that have been left bare rapidly get colonized with bearberry, earth star, British soldier lichen, reindeer lichen, and really kind of kickstart that succession. In contrast, quarry stand results in spotted knapweed, spurge, olive, and plants that are invasive and would not be noxious and not contribute to the protection of the area. So a single construction access, a retention of the dune land soils, I think are, and a simplification of the revegetation plan, I think are important going forward. The grading plan that the board had asked for, it does look like there must have been a fairly recent cessation of use of the western two footpaths there. They have started overgrowing now with a combination of beach pea and beach grass. If the applicant wants to plant that further, the planning department wouldn't have any objection to that. The addition of fill is probably not necessary, and if that cessation of use continues, I mean, this is a 2023 aerial, and those footpaths are very distinct. If you go back to the properties, if you take a look at those western two, there are places where it's almost imperceptible, and that should be encouraged to continue. Allow that to infill naturally. I think that's all that I want to initially offer the board. If there are any questions that I can answer, I'll do my best. And again, if there's any other content from the file that the board either wants now or wants in response to answer concerns from the public, they're available as well.
Just a quick question. Rick had talked about the potential expansion of the existing relative to the proposed. You want to weigh in on that?
I didn't look at it for that. It's true that an addition on the landward side would meet a 50-foot setback, but at a 50-foot lot width, that would be a pretty narrow addition. So I haven't looked at what those would be. It would be a one-story addition or it seems like it would need to be a one-story addition on a 50, it's hard to meet pyramid on a 50-foot wide lot, especially if you're in a flood zone that has any elevation requirements. So I wouldn't discount it, but I couldn't verify it.
These three lots as they exist now, or they, something you want to say? Those three lots as they exist now, all could come in front of the board at one point looking for improvements. And if those three improvements, there's something we have to consider a little bit here, saying what would happen if they came. Obviously, each would be individual, we might turn them down, but there is that possibility that we're looking at three structures, and that's part of the balance we have to look at here. I also wanted to support what we just had to say in terms of the native seed bank and native soils. It seemed really critical that that's part of their protocol and future planting plan, that we know that we're not going to be hauling out native soils and bringing in artificial fill, and also the fact that even though it's not seen, as you mentioned, our approach, that the seed bank alone helps for revegetation in these areas and regeneration. So I fully support that, and I think that has to be incorporated in any proposal that they come back with us on, to make sure that we're staying in line with your comments about what's best do.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you.
Anybody from the public would like to address this application?
Good evening, Chair, Board, nice to meet you. I know I only have 3 minutes. I can do it in 3 minutes, but it's be easier to have a little more time, so be.
Okay, do you want to announce yourself?
Yes. My name is Stefan Van Dam. I'm a neighbor of Sammy's Beach Road for over 35 years.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I'll just note that I know you have a 3-minute limit, but we do have your letter in our files, so we haven't gone through it and read it.
Thanks for acknowledging that, Chair. Okay, 35 years enjoying my daily swims, weather permitting, and feeling fortunate to live on the wetland side of a barrier peninsula with all the natural beauty and the protection it provides to our property and the town at large. For years, I liked the intelligent restraint that the Ammon family showed in keeping to the existing footprints of the properties they purchased, first number 37, then later 33 and 35, which they now want to combine into a game-changing structure of more than 4,500 square feet on a less than 1 acre buildable lot. The proposed decks double the footprint of the house. Sammy's Beach is a key defense to protect 3 Mile Harbor, the largest in town, and a major economic engine against nor'easters and hurricanes. Barrier Islands are among the most valuable, vulnerable, and constantly shifting coastal environments which provide significant biodiversity and habitat for endangered species. Their origins, soil components, groundwater dynamics, and surface aquifers remain somewhat of a mystery. And the mixing between ocean, bay, and groundwaters are not entirely understood by the scientific community. All properties sit at the thinnest and most vulnerable stretch of this barrier peninsula, with less than 200 feet between the dune crest of Sammy's Beach and the wetlands of 3 Mile Harbor. In short, Sammy's Beach Road is a fragile, constantly shifting environment with unknown soil components which could easily be wiped out by the next hurricane. It is clear that putting a 2,500 square foot basement into shifting sands is not a sustainable concept. A natural channel from the bay into the harbor existed there 100 years ago, which was later filled in. One of the lessons we learned from Hurricane Sandy is that water will always seek to regain its former flows. But the specific considerations before the board in granting the variance are as follows. All 3 properties sit in flood zones A, E, V, E, and X, and they will, however they're moved, and are subject to various protection overlay districts. Here are the specific details. 1, under the coastal setback restriction number 255440E2, no structure shall be enlarged or built within 100 feet from the dune crest on properties of this size, above 30,000. The proposed plans show a distance of 68.6 from the dune crest. Section F mandates no construction within 100 feet of inner harbors, with the proposed garage at 73.4 feet from the 3 Mile Harbor. Any possible exceptions under 255440 are reserved for reconstructions of destroyed structures and make no mention of deliberately demolished ones. 2, under the Harbor Protection Overlay District 255375B1, no new sanitary septic system shall be installed or constructed unless it is set back a minimum of 200 feet.
Mr. Van Dam, I'm going to remind you that we have this in front of us.
Okay.
So we can read, so maybe you can.
Let's talk septic. Let's talk septic. Since I'm a swimmer, I'm concerned about this. And I know the difference whether I swim in the spring, in the fall, or in the summer, and whether when I go down to the beach, I swim to the left where the houses are, or to the right where the nature preserve is. So the septic tanks and leach fields that are shown on the plan cross 2 flood zones and are only 125 feet away from the wetland. The applicant seeks a special relief to release a nitrogen load of 6, it's not quite clear whether it's 5, 7, or 6 full bathrooms, into one of the most fragile environments in East Hampton. Our town has some of the highest nitrogen levels as it is in the state and finds itself in a septic crisis. It would be helpful if the plans actually added elevations to show the depth of the septic systems relative to groundwater level. The Suffolk County tax map shows groundwater level of between 5 and 10 feet. Groundwater on barrier islands is generally higher than surface water with tidal intermixing. So even a 4-foot clearance to keep sewage from our groundwater in 3 Mile Harbor seems insufficient, according to a recent MIT study that found that the soil dynamics of barrier islands rose 7 feet under a similar dune after a storm. Suffolk County Health Department says...
I have a question.
Yes.
The existing septic that is there may or may not have a cesspool. Would you agree that putting in 1 new IA system would be better than leaving the 3? Or are you saying you don't want any development, you want them to move out of their house and stop using it altogether?
That's very argumentative.
Well, that's
No, we like them. They're nice people. They're our neighbors.
we have to make a decision. Do we let them develop 3 separate houses? Or is 1 house better with fewer nonconformities? We can't tell them they can't do anything.
I'm not suggesting. I would simply like to.
You're giving us a lecture on septic system.
No, I'm simply did the research of what the county requires for.
But again, you've given us this research. You've gone well beyond the 3 minutes.
Right, so let me
Are you
just close it
intending to
up
read this
then.
whole thing in the record?
Huh?
Are you intending to read this whole report into the
I
record?
got 2 more paragraphs. May I finish them, please?
2 more paragraphs, okay.
Yeah, okay, so Suffolk County says even the low nitrogen IA systems that are mandated at the size of the septic tank for a 6-bedroom house on mainland soil needs to hold at least 750 gallons at a flow rate of 660 to 1,000 gallons per day into the leach area. We all try not to imagine the ill effects of this sewage volume on a barrier peninsula with deep tidal mixing. Okay. If the town's rules have any meaning, then this proposal, as proposed, should not qualify for any relief or variances because it is damaging to the integrity of the barrier peninsula, likely pollutes the harbor, undermines the public's enjoyment of Sammy's Beach, plus gambles with the public's safety and puts the resilience of our town at risk. The relief we as a community seek is that this burdensome and inappropriate project does not get the go-ahead as proposed to endanger our neighborhood and condemn residents to 2 years of incessant construction noise and pollution. I have also taken a stab at estimating what are the costs and damages to the community of this construction, and what are the environmental costs?
Sir, we have this in front of you.
Yes, so-
Okay? We're going to ask you to stop now and turn it over to somebody else.
Sure. Thank you for giving me the time to make my presentation. Thank you.
Next, is there anybody else?
We're connected.
Again, I'm just going to remind you, if you submitted something in writing, we have it. So,
Right. You want me to swear in first? I'm
No.
Gail Pellet. I live at 20 Sammy's Beach
You swear
Road.
affirm to tell,
Your neighbors.
you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I'll try. Although I just want to preface this, it's very good to see Rick Whalen here. I'm glad. But I'm a little disappointed that you kind of tainted this whole hearing by accusing all of the people
Ma'am,
who've
excuse me.
written them.
Listen, people, everybody here, you're here to address the board.
I know, but I
So, no,
want to.
just- It doesn't matter.
It's the real world that
Respect that.
we communicate in and
I
things, but I
appreciate
do feel that he was allowed to taint this hearing by accusing all of us of having untruths and lies, when in fact, we've all looked at the plans, we've looked at the code, and we've read the very excellent technical study that Brian Frank did, or analysis. So I'm Gail Pellet, and I live and have lived on Sammy's Beach Road for somewhat 35 years. So I'm acutely aware of the environmental as well as the safety, health, and the issues of the common good for this community at stake in this application. I have a much longer letter that I've submitted, so I'm just going to take little samples. But this hearing is all about code, the law, regulations, and whether this applicant has the right to circumvent them. Brian Frank, as I said, from the building department, who we just heard from, has made a detailed analysis of this plan and the code issues, complicated because of what we've heard already here today, by all the overlays, the districts, the regulations regarding this fragile coast and dune and wetland landscape on this dune barrier peninsula, regulations from which this application seeks relief. He warns of the fragility, we just heard this, and the changeability of this dune environment. I also want to acknowledge while I'm here that the house that I've shared with my husband at 20 Sammy's Beach Road for all this long time was built in 1966, and where we've not changed the footprint, but would never be permitted today. It sits directly in the wetlands. But what did anyone know then? Okay. However, since the 1960s, there's been a ton of scientific research coming from environmentalists, from marine biologists, from hydrologists, scientists of all kinds, that have informed the code of laws and regulations at our local, municipal, county, state, and federal levels that govern the application that is before you today. These properties are located, as people have said, on the narrowest segment of Sammy's Beach Road, sandwiched between wetlands of 3 Mile Harbor and the beach on Gardiner's Bay. Extensive taxpayer monies have been spent on research and consultants in developing this town's comprehensive plan and in articulating code regulations over these past 50 years. And we got a sense of the complexity of them here today. We have to ask ourselves, and this is what we have done as neighbors and in our household, why we have these regulations. Because applicants making so-called relief from them are basically getting around these labored over regulations. We watch as decisions are made to offer variance after variance. So what do the regulations mean? When the variance isn't granted by this board, you know what happens. It goes to the court. People with means take it to court, and so often, time again and again, the judges decide in favor of the applicants. So what do the regulations mean if everywhere they are fungible? For example, this is an application for a home with which it's not clear today whether it's 5 or 6 bedrooms who want relief from the regulations that require a 200-foot setback. We've talked about this for the septic. I've run out of time. I will leave you. I raised issues about the environmental issue, about the ground. We were also part of, a whole bunch of us in the neighborhood of the Friends of Sammy's Beach. We're very knowledgeable about the time it takes to restore vegetation, natural vegetation. Just want to leave you with one thought. It's a quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's the author of Braiding Sweetgrass. It was in an opinion piece in the New York Times this weekend. We need more than policy change. We need a change of worldview. From the fiction of human exceptionalism to the reality of our kinship and reciprocity with the living world. The earth asks that we renounce a culture of endless taking so that the world can continue. We have a board that has signed off on the resolution of making all decisions in this community first on the basis of the climate crisis that we are in. And I thank you for the struggle that it's going to be in an application like this that comes before this board. But we have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
There's no one back there.
Hello. My name is Patricia Sansone.
You swear, affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this meeting tonight. And
You just talk into the mic a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
is that better? As you noted, Sammy's Beach is one of the most beautiful places, special, sensitive, the entire East End. And taking 3 lots and making them one giant lot with a 4,600 square foot house, which it took my breath away when I heard the square footage. It's tragic. And talking about the setbacks and the variances, I don't understand why the applicants can't understand that they should reduce the size of the house or work with the properties that they have. I think merging 3 lots is so inappropriate, will so damage that beautiful neighborhood. There's something that really needs to be really deeply thought about. And if they want to make improvements to each of the individual houses, yes, but within the restraints of the zoning. I think granting variances all the time is really destroying our world. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? James?
Sure.
Excuse me, Chair, do you need your address, the last speaker?
Excuse me?
Do you need the last speaker's address?
Yes.
Sorry, before you start, could you just state her address for the record, please?
Sure. It's 6 Pioneer Lane.
Thank you.
Pioneer Lane, thank you. Okay.
Good evening, board. My name is Jane Meering. I reside at 32 Ocean Lane in Amagansett.
Jane, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. And you have a letter from me, and I'm really, usually I'm like right on my bullet points. So I'm going to wing it a little bit, and I'm really want to focus in on the character and the size of the house. So the character of the neighborhood, you've already articulated how important it is. So Mr. Whalen described a 4,600 plus square foot house as sort of moderate by standards of comparison, but not necessarily is this moderate relative to this setting and this neighborhood. The architect in one of the memorandums states that the 4,600 plus square foot house sits lightly on the landscape. And of course, that doesn't include all the decking and, you know, this cement basement below grade. So one of the reasons I've come to this hearing is because I want to give some perspective of what a house even smaller than this feels like and looks like. You know where I live. I live near Marine Boulevard. At the end of my block is a 4,000 square foot house that sits on dune land. Right down the block is a 3,900 square foot house that sits on dune land. There's another house that's new that was 2,900 square feet. And I will tell you that they loom, they are quite large. They feel very incompatible. This house is even bigger than that. It is also pretty much all glass. That does not make it look lighter. It undermines dark skies. It's a problem for habitat. I don't know if you saw the rendering of what this is going to look like from the beach, but it will be profound, absolutely profound. And so this is a game changer for Sammy's Beach. I would be dramatic and say it's a death knell doing something like that, but I'm going to refrain from that. But we know that there are other neighbors who also have lots that they would probably like to combine. You must, I beg you, to think of this as a precedent-setting transaction and to take that very seriously of how the dominoes will fall after that. So the character is incomparable. It's, to me, just amazing that something like this would be done. I just want to touch on the almost 29,000 square feet that is on the survey that talks about the construction-related clearing, which I believe also has grading, excavation. I guess we need to know more, but that type of damage environmentally seems unconscionable and unnecessary, and you can revegetate, but it can take decades, you know, to really restore the property. I can't imagine why that type of clearing could possibly be necessary. You know, there's a presumption, we see this all the time, that everyone gets more than what they already have when they redevelop. And I just, that doesn't seem to be a proper standard when you're in right on top of a VE flood zone. It's just out of it when you're, you know, all beyond the CHA line, when you're looking for all these NRSP standards. So I will leave you to my letter, but those are the points that I wanted to make tonight. Can I just say one quick thing? This issue with the septic system, right? A brand new low nitrogen septic is required of redevelopment. We don't give people credit you know, for doing it. It's not mitigation. So, I mean, it's happening. And I don't know that, you know, the equation is, oh, will we leave 3 cesspools, you know, in the ground to leach? I just don't see that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hello, I'm Ernie French. I live at 1 Sammy's Beach Road. I live in a 800 square foot house. I'm sorry, I do swear to tell the whole truth. I'm a fishing guide. I spend a good deal of my time out on the water, and I just want to make people a little bit aware of what climate change is. My fishing season used to start in the fall run, September 1st every year. Right now, it starts at October 15th. The seasons have moved up 6 weeks. I see it. Most people, because they're in their pools, you know, it's another couple weeks of nice weather and stuff like that, but I'm seeing it change. And I think that you have to stick to these zoning laws. You can't set precedents. You can't turn Sammy's Beach Road into Flying Point, or worse, Hampton Bays, because that's the way it's going. And that abomination on 5 Sammy's Beach Road is unbelievable. And that's all I got to say. I'm just pissed at all this stuff that's going on. You got to do something, and you got to stick with what's right. You know what? The Hamptons is not about money. It's always about more money. And that's all I got to say about it.
Thank you. Anything else?
My name is Jess Frost. I live at 366 3 Mile Harbor Road in East Hampton.
You swear firm?
I swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but. I just want to thank the community members that came out to defend Sammy Beach and the ecology, the fragile ecosystem that exists there. I've lived here on and off since 1973 and for 20 years full-time. I spend almost every morning at Sammy's Beach and am astounded at the wildlife that's there. And I think that anything that is in any way, shape, or form a threat to that wildlife should be seriously considered. And I can point to, I live off 3 Mile Harbor Road, 98 Squaw Road, which is directly across the water from Sammy's Beach, is a huge eyesore. I know that that house is very sparsely used, and I don't know how it was allowed to be built, but it's just a horrific thing to look at when you're paddleboarding or out there in the water. It's an enormous Home Depot as far as I'm concerned. So I think anything that is scaled beyond what our community character is made of should be seriously considered. Thank you.
Anybody else? None? Matt, is there anybody on the phone?
Yes, you do. Are you ready?
How many?
Just one.
Okay, thank you.
I scared you, didn't I? Okay. Unmuting last 4 digits. 1001. You are live.
Hello, caller. Are you here for this application? Hello? Thank you, Matt. You can hang up.
Okay, they are muted.
Thank you. Rick?
Richard Whalen, again, attorney for the applicants, Dan and Pernilla Ammon. I'll be very quick. Bottom line is we're being attacked for proposing to merge 3 non-conforming lots into 1 lot and to reduce the number of homes.
You're not being attacked.
Hey, hold on. That's out of line. You're out of line, sir.
Oh, he is.
No, he's got the chair.
As I said, we're being attacked for reducing the number of houses on our property from 3 to 1 and combining the lot to make it more conforming. The variances that we need, and I would cite from one of the speakers said in her written material, she said that we are circumventing the town's rules. No, we're seeking variances. That's not circumventing the rules. That's allowed. And the variances we need are basically of 2 categories. The dune crest setback variance for the house in the dune and a house on the deck to move them back approximately 35 feet or more from the existing structures on the property. We're needing the variance to become more conforming to the dune setback, or at least achieve a greater dune setback. We also need the variance to install a new septic system that will, again, be both more conforming to the wetland setback from Sammy Beach by a good margin, and is an IA system. Those are the variants that we see. Both of them are, objectively speaking, environmental improvements to the property. So it seems like the main objection, I guess, of some of the neighbors and some of the comments, I'm sure most of the people in question have not really read the application. They're probably not really familiar with this. It sounds like they got an email blast and were told, come out and speak against this. But if the objection is that we're making the buildings and the property bigger, we're talking about a 780 square feet increase in the gross floor area of the cumulative building. 780 square feet, that's not a lot. One of the gentlemen right here said he spoke, he lives in a house that's larger than that. So it's not, we don't have to do this. You might deny it. The Ammons might decide not to go forward with it. There's an assumption that, well, of course, there's going to be an increase in improvement in the septic. No, we only put in an IA system if we get an approval. Otherwise, nothing changes. We go on with the owners go on with the houses the way they are today. Maybe they come in and say they do a small addition to 1 or more of them. Brian did speak about that. the side yard setbacks on even a 50-foot lot are only 8 foot because of the 4/10 rule. So you can put a 1-story addition on the back side of them. That is something that's very realistic. They could do that. It's not what they want to do. They want to put in a modern house. They want to make major improvements to the property. So all I'm saying is, a lot of this gets very emotional. I'm asking you to look at what we're actually proposing compared to the regulations. It's a sound, and environmentally sound project, and I believe it deserves your approval. Thank you.
Rick, stay here. Rick, you want to?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to leave the record open. How much time?
I guess. Somebody actually.
Technically, no, but
Mr. Chairman? Yes. We do have a number of things to give you. We want to do them right. So I'm going to ask for 8 weeks as leaving the record open for 8 weeks for that. And if the trustees want to submit a comment on this,
they can do it within 8 weeks.
Yeah, I want the right to respond if they submit anything that I don't agree with.
For that reason, we pick 8 weeks. Let's let it land on a Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm not trying to, that's why I said I don't want to.
That would be either December 12th or December 19th. No, October, November, I'm sorry. November 14th.
I have the 21st, November 21st. Do we have a meeting that night?
I think we do. Is that right before
Yeah, we have the
Thanksgiving?
21st.
I think we do. I think we do.
Oh, I'm not looking. Oh, that's Thanksgiving week.
I think it should land on a Tuesday in the event that the trustees submit something for last minute, then we will be another week or two for him to respond.
So
21st. Make it the 21st.
now, if there's any submission by the trustees that I want to respond to, presumably they'll submit before that, I would hope, but I want the right to respond to something.
That's why I think it's appropriate to.
Again, as always, if you feel you need a little bit more time, you know.
So tentatively, hearing open until, record open for submission of our materials and anything from the trustees till November 21st, but not the general record open, right? Right, we're only for these specified materials.
Right.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
So with that, I'll make the motion in the application of Hampton, 33, 35, 37 Sandwich Beach Road, East Hampton. Subject tax map number 300-56-1-11, 12, and 14.2 to close the public hearing will be open until November 21st for submission of. What are we submitting again?
So at least 4 things.
Protocol,
Construction protocol, revegetation plan, grading plan, and I guess a demolition plan.
okay, as noted,
And a revision.
for the trustees to submit. Right. Thank you. That motion carries. Second.
Concur.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. Next, we have Alicia Goldstein at 24 Sandwich Beach Road, East Hampton, subject tax number 300-56-2, 35.3. The size and location is 46,532 square feet. Sandwich Beach Road, East Hampton, 300-56-2-35.3. The description is to allow the reconstruction and 10 square foot of deck addition, expanded driveway, associated retaining wall to remain on a parcel of land containing tidal wetlands. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420, variances of 255-430, minimum wetland setbacks and 255-1174A, scenic easement setbacks from the town code. Variances of 91.8 feet and 91.2 feet are required to allow the deck, addition, and driveway retaining wall to remain 8.2 feet, 8.8 feet respectively from wetlands where 100-foot setback is required. A variance of 1.8 feet is required to allow the deck to remain 8.2 feet from the scenic easement boundary where a 10-foot setback is required. And the variance is required to allow land clearing to be reduced from 20 feet to approximately 8 feet from wetlands where a 50-foot setback is required. Zoning district is 18 residents, 80 flood zone, elevation 6, and the safety class is type 2. Council, do we have proper affidavit of service posted?
Yes, Chair, I reviewed the affidavit and everything seems to be in order.
Thank you. And once again, this is my report. I was there today. This is this picture of posting. Next. Brian, you running the photos? Who's doing the photos?
Sorry.
If you notice, this house appears to be listed for sale. Next. Again, taking a look, you're going to see that a lot of new landscaping is done on this property. Next. This is the house across the street on the corner of Sands Beach Road and Bianco. Next. Now, taking a look, walk into the driveway. We're looking directly east. Next. Okay, so I'm scanning over now. You can see the expansion of the driveway here. The retaining wall is beyond that tree. I'll have photos of that. First, I take a scan over to the north, so you can see all the lawn and landscaping that's been done. Next. So this is the driveway and the retaining wall. Actually, when I was there, the ground was wet up to that, basically up to the retaining wall. So just so you know, it's right up against the wetlands here. Next. Take a couple of pictures looking back at the retaining wall. Now we're going to take a walk up to the deck. This is the deck that was expanded. Next. Again, just taking a load. This is on my way back to the deck, looking at the landscaping in the garage. Next. This is a shed, accessory building. I'm not sure what the use of it is, but this is tucked against the wetlands, but it's not part of this application. That's a heat in that thing?
Had a flu.
This is the next. You can see right up against this deck, wetlands. It's basically right up against this deck, all around the deck. Next. Taking a look again, just looking at it close around what's going on. Next. Looks like there was some clearing done there too. So now we're looking over towards the marshes, looking over towards 3 Mile Harbor. Beautiful. Next. This is the other side of the deck. Again, wetlands straight up against it. Got it. Next. Again, same scenario. Next. So again, this is the lawn. You're going to see the row of evergreens beyond that, and they end up going straight up against the wetlands as well. Next. There you go.
I believe that's the last one.
That's the last one. Oh, that's the last one. That's the deck. That's the other deck with the shower. That's not part of this application. Thank you. You have the applicant here? You.
Good evening, Sharon McCaffrey, Business Planning.
Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Deline and board members. We're here this evening to discuss 24 Sammy's Beach Road. I represent the homeowner, Alicia Goldstein, who purchased the property in April of 2022. The property is located on one of the bends of Sammy's Beach Road. The lot has an area of 46,532 square feet, but once the wetlands are excluded, the lot area is 15,796 square feet. At the time the property was purchased, there were parts of the decks rotting that also caused areas of the exterior walls to rot that needed to be repaired. This property has been reviewed by the board in the past. In July of 2000, the property received approval for an addition. This approval required that a scenic easement be established and is immediately adjacent to the existing deck and house, which creates a non-conforming setback for the deck and the house to the scenic easement. 10 feet is normally required. The scenic easement states that the deck can be replaced and maintained without the need of a variance or permits. The original decking was wrapped around the whole house and was much more decking than the owner needed. The applicant removed 232 square feet of decking, but it repaired the remaining deck squared off an existing awkward angle that equals 9.6 square feet of new decking. Given the scenic easement and the removal of the other decking, she did not realize the permits were required for this small addition. She also trusted that her contractor would have advised her if a permit was needed. The most recent certificate of occupancy shows a pull-through driveway which was excessive in size at 2,800 square feet and did not provide adequate access to the existing garage. To improve the driveway and garage situation, the applicant has restored the entrance on the western property line closest to the garage, removed 1,643 square feet of driveway, and closed the driveway access on the northern property line. To provide better access and turning radius for the garage, the driveway was expanded to the south by 475 square feet. This has resulted in a total driveway area of 1,147 square feet and provides direct access to the garage. The reduction of the driveway by more than 50% is an overall improvement. Due to the grade change on the south side of the driveway, a wood retaining wall was constructed for support. Again, the applicant trusted that their contractor would advise them when and if a permit was necessary, and relied on his professional knowledge to use the correct material.
Excuse me, you can't blame the contractor here. This is the homeowner's responsibility. We hear this over and over again. This is egregious. The homeowner cannot, in their right mind, say that they were naive about this. They can't.
Like in speaking to the homeowner, we weren't involved at all before any of this was happened. The stop work order was issued. That's when we got a call. She didn't realize what she was doing.
Zero improvements on this property, zero. It went through the zoning board on multiple occasions before. Any change must come to the town and zoning board. To sit there and say that this is an improvement of what was there before, that's pretty brazen.
I mean, she did reduce.
It doesn't matter. She did it illegally.
So we're here to try to make the situation better.
Turn it the way it was.
To put back all of the driveway.
The egregiousness of what went on in this property is astounding.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
These are really substantial variances. So for the record, I'd like you to address this board and tell us how you think this meets the standards and why this warrants approval.
Well, so after reviewing the technical analysis memo, she now knows that using the treated lumber cannot stay. And so she is willing, if the board would approve the retaining wall, that she would change the material to a tropical hardwood or stone. Also, we would be willing to work with the planning department to make the driveway as small as possible rather than having more covered area. She also is willing to restore plantings to native vegetation to bring it back into conformance to the previous 2015 CO survey. She now knows, she didn't mean to do it. It wasn't smart what she did. But now we have
property in 2022. There's a for sale sign on it now. That doesn't mean that she did this naively. She did this with intent, it looks like. So, I don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
I mean, the property is unique in that it's predominantly wetlands and with all upland portions being within 100-foot wetland setback. So yes, she now knows that she has, when you own a property in the town of East Hampton, that when you're this close to wetlands, you have to come to this board for relief or permission. And so I don't think that.
Willing to submit a re-veg plan?
Yes. And so I submitted earlier today showing an area that she could revegetate. We are also willing to work with the planning department to discuss the area. If Brian would find a better area, more suitable, she's willing to work with that. I mean, she did remove a significant amount of decking and only added 9.6 square feet to the stair area to make it a bit safer.
Well, I just want to say, just reinforcing what's been said here by the chair, is that other than just the nature of the fact that the work is done, if it's just a recent purchase and the applicant is totally unaware of town zoning, especially being right in the wetlands, and they were very poorly represented by either their attorney at closing or the real estate agent, because you cannot be buying anything in the town of East Hampton right in wetlands without knowing that there are repercussions to any work you do, any work under these conditions. We've had to come in front of this board. So anyone who buys that property under those conditions and does this work, it's a very tough sell to come back to us and say, well, there's this small change or we're willing to make some improvement. You can make your representation to us and we can take into consideration. But as the chair had said, we're looking at this sitting right in wetlands, and it's not as if it was owned for many, many years. This was done overgrown. This is all really recent work, and this is not new zoning. It's not a new attitude by this board or by the town. This is a tough
I'll even go far as if she's using photos of this thing for the sale of the property, that's false advertising, because it's not gonna end up looking like this.
I mean,
I think though this is a public hearing, and I appreciate you coming before us tonight. But you have to understand that this board, we have standards that we have to look at and meet. And this is a poor candidate for what you're asking for, because the area is very, constrained.
I do understand that these variances are very substantial asks, but I do think she was poorly advised at purchase. She didn't realize this is her first property owned in town of East Hampton, so she now knows she was naive and didn't familiarize herself with the regulations. And she also had this scenic easement that states that you can rebuild and replace the deck without the need of a variance and permit, so she didn't think that she needed a permit for the deck, even though squaring off would require a permit. The rest of the deck doesn't require a variance.
But in this case, the board, we as a board are gonna have to look at the standards that are outlined in the code, and that's what we'll have to base our decision on.
Does it have a new IA system?
I discussed earlier with her today about her thoughts on an IA septic system. So if it's something that the board would be interested in, I would like to keep the record open for a week to discuss it further with her.
I'm sorry, I missed that, to discuss.
If an IA septic system should be installed.
You're offering that she's willing to replace the retaining wall with
a suitable material.
And to remake the driveway smaller back to.
Well, the driveway is smaller now. We could work with the planning. I think there's about 30 feet from the retaining wall to the garage. So we could try to bring it in probably a couple, 2 or 3 feet, and restore that area with native plantings we would just have to allow the garage, unfortunately, has the garage doors facing the south instead of the road. So they just would need to be able to have turning radius access out of the garage.
And revegetation to the point of coming back in different form, it's like 900 somewhat feet.
It would, no, back to the 2015 survey, which was clearing. Oh, perfect. To the 7,795 square feet.
And clearing?
That would be the clearing after revegetation.
And 7,700?
And 95.
Well, it will probably take you more than a week to get a re-veg plan and also to show us the new driveway.
Probably to get the survey updated, probably will take us 3 to 4 weeks.
And please don't get me wrong, I'm not mad at you.
No, I know. I know, and unfortunately.
But it's applications like this really gets me upset, so, it's like obvious.
No, it's not an easy one.
But you got green lawn, they're fertilizing the green lawn, it's all going to the wetlands, it's terrible.
It's actually shocking. She said that she's not fertilizing it. I double checked that today. I think it's mainly crabgrass, and that's why it looks so green, at least when I was there.
Anybody else have any questions?
It's a huge ask.
Yeah.
I just want to know what you're offering, tell us everything you're offering.
Yeah, this is your chance to do that.
Well, I mean, how would the board feel if an IA septic system?
You can't.
Yeah, we're not gonna
Make
really-
a submission
yeah.
and we can look at it.
Yeah, we're not gonna redesign it here tonight, but you can make the submission. Maybe planning. Can get their view on it. We need to hear from them.
I'll let Brian go.
All right, thank you. Brian?
So we get the aerial. Brian Frank from the Planning Department. I think I'm still sworn in. This is the most current aerial of the property now. This is 2023. This is a property with a lot of history in front of the zoning board, and the structures in the application themselves are physically small, but the magnitude of the variances, the impact of them are very large. So I'm going to address the application in kind of 2 or even 3 parts. I'd like to keep what they've applied for separate from the clearing, which is arguably the most egregious issue, has not been applied for in this application. And I'll show you how the clearing has changed over the years and how, that the addition of that lawn is really pure poison to 3 Mile Harbor. But let's get to what the application was applied for. And that was a very small deck addition that needs over 90-foot wetland setback variance and an expansion of the driveway on the south side of the garage. This property was reviewed extensively by the zoning board, so it's hard to imagine any diligence on the part of a property owner not knowing that this was a regulated area, that there was a history, that there was an established and documented sensitivity on this property. This town has a lot of properties that are non-conforming to wetland setbacks on every harbor in town, in 3 Mile, Acquabonic, Lake Montauk, everywhere you've got houses that were built usually originally prior to zoning. And the board has to be careful about granting variances for things that were built without permits that don't meet the variance standards. Some of the considerations that you would put into for a deck or even the driveway are how did it come to be? Attributing it to relying on somebody else, the onus still starts with the owner. The cost of removal is something that the board looks at in applications, either cutting back the deck a little bit or doing something with a gravel driveway and the retaining wall is not a substantial cost. This is not removing a foundation, a part of a building. And the impacts, as I said, are severe. Even though the deck addition is small, if the board grants it in this application, when somebody else does something similar on another harbor, on Old Stone Highway, on Girard Drive, on South Lake Drive, how do you distinguish it when somebody just does it without a permit and there's really no correlating mitigation? There's no way to mitigate the driveway on the south side, and I'm not comfortable offering to work with the applicant on anything to make the driveway any larger than what it was. With respect to this board's predecessor, the predecessors, the decision to grant that detached garage on this property was not really the board's finest moment, in my opinion. in 2014. I don't know why the applicant chose at the time to put the doors on the south side of the garage instead of the west side of the garage. But that's the way this property was when this owner bought the property. And that driveway was already very close to the wetland. The driveway is actually in a better location on the north side of the property. The west side of this section of Sammy's Beach Road is extremely flood prone. It's low. The wetlands to the south and beyond the property come very close to the edge of the road. There is no rational basis for allowing an undesigned, unengineered deflection of sheet flow stormwater in an area of chronic flooding like this. It's bad for the wetlands, it's bad for safety. This is a sole source access road to the rest of the peninsula. I can go on and on. There's nothing good that you can say about it. And the fact that they can't turn around in the driveway to get in a garage that was built that way when they bought it is really, it's a quirk of the property that they may just have to learn to live with. I do want to show you the extent of clearing on the aerial. This is not crabgrass, this is sod. And there is no way to sustain a lawn this close to tidal wetlands, built on marsh muck and a thin layer of dune sand without, at the very least, regular irrigation and quite probably fertilizers. There's no buffer to the wetland to speak of. It's pitched down to the wetlands. So any fertilizer that you put on this property is going right into the wetland when we are trying like heck to reduce the amount of nitrogen and other pollutants that are not just stressing the resources, but really have, enormous consequences in the form of algal blooms, poor dissolved, just a suite of water quality problems that the town is bending over, that communities all over Long Island, but East Hampton is a leader, I would say, in trying to mitigate. So the sanitary system is kind of in this corner up here. You can't revegetate with much more than grasses over that, but I do want to show you what the property looked like in 2016, which was shortly after the most recent CO.
Does this presently have a CO? No,
the CO was in 2015. It's the most recent. So this is it in 2015. The garage was relatively new. This is the driveway on the north side and the narrow, as Shannon described it, the pass through. So you could see in the short time that the owner has owned this property, they've made a number of changes that are really, really out of step with the town's environmental protection standards. There's no evidence that's been submitted that this meets the natural resource special permit standards. There's no evidence that's been submitted that it meets any of the variance standards. And you could be sympathetic for an owner if she got misled, but it's still, the buck stops with the owner in terms of remediating this. It's hard to envision any relief that this board can provide in this application that doesn't degrade the resource you're charged with protecting and set a negative precedent for other properties. And that's kind of the bottom line.
Also, I'd like to say for the record, it is in a harbor protection overlay district, and that the clearing on the property exceeds that 10,000 square foot maximum. And this was predominantly done by the establishment of these lawn areas.
Yes, that's demonstrably true just by looking at the history of the aerials. You have others, I think, that I included in the file. I could show you others, but really it's from the most recent CO going forward that I think demonstrate the changes. I think even going up to the maximum clearing of 10,000 is problematic, and that number that they had, it's hard to imagine that just under 8,000. It's hard to imagine going beyond that in any way responsibly.
So what was allowed? What was approved?
Well, nothing was necessarily approved. What was on there was pre-existing non-conforming, and I can go back to the 2015.
No, I'm talking about the lawn, specifically the lawn. In the previous ZBA determinations, you said 2014?
Yeah, 2014.
So-
I don't know that there was any clearing authorized except for that which allowed the garage to be built.
So was there any revegetation required or anything like that? Was that lawn before there then? Or
No, there was no lawn on the property there. I had worked with the prior owner on a revegetation of the area south of the garage. The southern portion of the property, this area here was planted extensively by Beverly Bond with a marsh shrub, Baccharis halmilifolia.
in a sense where you see that lawn and all that landscaping material,
That was all
and
vegetated.
stuff that all basically should come out, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It's hard to argue any other way. Or to see any other way. There's no documented clearing in that area except maybe a little ring around the newer cesspools. But again, I could go back to the 2015 aerial or others around that time frame. There was no lawn in that area at that time.
And the removal of that would not be considered mitigation for the other violations.
No. No, I think it would be remediating a self-created problem.
That's correct.
And Member Berger, did I hear you wanted to see?
Do we have a copy of that CFO?
Yes, I'm sure you have it in your file, but if you need another copy, I can do that.
I have a dumb question. Is it possible to move the garage doors?
I don't think that's a dumb question at all, but that's really something that needs to be addressed by the applicant. If the driveway is unusable in that location, I think that moving the garage door should be looked at. And not everybody parks their cars in a garage. A lot of people use their garage for other purposes, and but moving the garage door and relocating the driveway to be west of the garage is, I think, reasonable to consider. It's worth taking a look at what that looks like. I do think, again, the driveway was better on the north side of the property where the elevation, believe it or not, is higher. And it's farther than the wetlands than anywhere around the garage. And you would be correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Is there anybody in the public that would address this?
Hi again. I'd like to thank the board for making the statement.
You are sworn in for the evening.
Yes, I'm so sworn in. We're taller here. Okay. That ignorance is not exculpatory in the town of East Hampton. I appreciate that. Okay, so and you already, Mr. Frank and the board, you all know this property very well. We've been their neighbor for 25 years. So I live next door, which hasn't, to this property, which hasn't been inhabited for 2 years and was for rent at $60,000 a month this summer. This house, like ours, as you know, sits in the wetlands. It may not sell due to an ugly construction site across the street at which the new owners of the property at 25 Bianca Road cleared and cut down most of the keystone oak trees in order to move a septic tank away from the dune crest. And when I spoke with the building inspector after listening to the seeing this, she said, well, we simply rubber stamped what the DEC decided, and the DEC must have decided to move that septic further back. And so all those trees that were on the north side of Bianca Road were mostly cut. So we'd like you to consider on what grounds, and perhaps if I think you're already in this process, on what grounds the owner deserves to be granted relief from violating the town code, installing a toxic turf lawn adjacent to the wetlands and thereby polluting our groundwater and the waters of 3 Mile Harbor. I've attached a picture of the flooding that used to be standard procedure when they watered that very lawn that you object to. A relief from what? Having willfully ignored local law in order to build a parking lot? Because that's what that really is. Defying the wetland setbacks by installing a chemical lawn with non-native trees whose overwatering pollutes 3 Mile Harbor with fertilizers and pesticides. The town is being asked to ignore its own rules to allow land clearing in from 20 feet to 8 feet from wetlands where a 50-foot setback is required, and to grant variances of 91.1 and 91.2 feet respectively, where a 100-foot setback is required. So this parking lot can legally continue to encroach on the wetlands. To grant relief after the fact for violating local laws without consequence simply encourages the very behavior that's killing our bays and harbors as we face the climate crisis. 3 Mile Harbor, as you all know, is a unique natural feature in our town. Why would we want to promote the disrespect and disregard of local zoning laws and put more stress on a fragile ecosystem that is already overburdened by development? It is us, the neighbors, who seek relief from the damages to our physical and mental health and sanity caused by overdevelopment, where we, the neighbors, bear the brunt and are asked to endure incessant construction, remodeling and landscaping noise, truck pollution, the felling and wood chipping of keystone species trees, the violation of our neighborhood. We wonder, doesn't an approval here set the wrong precedent in that it encourages the very destruction of our most precious natural resources and promotes further encroachment? So you know what I'm talking about, and I appreciate you making the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anybody else here like to talk? Thank you, Matt. Is there anybody on the phone?
Yes, you have one caller holding.
Wow, them in.
Okay. Unmuting last 4 digits. 9014. You are live.
Roll caller.
Roy, hang on a second.
Hello?
Caller, hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect. Go ahead, Roy.
Hi. Okay, you can hear me. Good. This is Nancy Erber. I'm at 4 Sammy's Beach Road, and I just want to thank Brian, Frank, and the members of the ZBA for listening so well to
Nancy, can you
understand.
Hold on a sec. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let's get that
I
out.
do. Sure. Absolutely. I swear. So anyways, I swear all the time. Yes, my husband says. Brian, Frank, thank you. You really laid out the case for it. And as a neighbor who walks by that property every day for years, we saw the terrible destruction. We saw the laying down of the turf. We called the building department. We called the inspectors. And you have very correctly analyzed the problem. It's a very fragile area, as has been said many times. The biodiversity needs to be protected there, and we really need to be careful of what we're doing on the earth and in the soil, because it is a system that works together. So thank you for bringing up the problem of the fragility and of the wetlands, the flooding, which is very obvious in that photo that was shown, and the need to be very, very, very cautious in allowing precedents and closing one's eyes to activities which are harming our very fragile environment. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have anything else to add?
Not really anything else to add. I would just like to be able to take the opportunity to speak with the homeowner regarding maybe the change of driveway, garage door location, and the IA septic system. So if we could keep the written record open.
How much time?
4 weeks.
Okay. I also have a concern too, with if it's true that they're trying to rent this house, I would check into whether or not they have a rental registry, part of the rental registry. And rental registry requires an updated C of O or a current C of O. And I think, I'm wondering, I'm curious to see how these violations affect the status of the C of O.
The violations didn't rescind CO, but right now, there's nobody renting the house and there's no potential rentings. It's just on the market for sale.
Will that be October 24th?
Don't have a calendar.
Yes.
Megan, I'll just.
Sounds like it.
Okay. Thank you.
Therefore, I'd like to make a motion in the application of Felicia Goldstein in 24 City. Subject tax map number 300-56-2-35.3. To close the public hearing, but leave the record open until October 24th.
Second it.
Concur. I concur.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Nevins Bennett LLC at 289 East Lake Drive, Montauk. Subject tax map number 300-13-1-6 and 26. The size and location is 76,623 square feet at 289 East Lake Drive, Montauk. The description is to construct an extension to an existing fixed dock consisting of a 4-foot by 18.5-foot fixed dock extension, 3-foot by 12-foot aluminum ramp, and 6-foot by 20-foot floating dock and associated pilings. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420. Zoning district is A residence, BE flood zone, elevation 11, and X flood zone, the secret classes unlisted. Also, do we have proper affidavit of service posted?
Read the affidavit of posting and notice, and it appears everything is in order with jurisdiction over this application.
Okay, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a photo of where it has been posted. I visited this site twice before I took these photos today, and at both times this sign was up, I'm assuming in the last day or so in the blow. It was still there on Saturday, I know, but I don't know about Sunday or Monday. But anyway, we do know that it was properly posted at one point. I'm going to attribute the fact that it's down to the rather severe weather we had. Next. I'm taking a look, this is on East Lake Drive, and I'm looking north here at this point. Next. Just turned and looked south. The house sits in a bit of a turn. You notice the road disappeared in both directions. There's a bit of a turn in East Lake here. Next. I've taken some photos. We're going to be talking about a dock, but it's an NRS space. We'll take some photos of the entire property. Here I am just inside the gate looking at the residence. Next. Again, I'm alongside it now looking back up at the residence. Next. I've worked my way down towards the lake, and there's a gate directly in front of me which provides access. At some point I'll be on the other side of the gate, but the gate is to the right of that fence line that would open up and allow the launching of a boat. Next. I've worked my way around and down towards the shore. I'm standing up on the top of a staircase looking at the dock in question. That stone wall we featured in a number of other photos. Next. Now I walk my way south and I'm looking north. You see the dock, you see the stone wall, you see a staircase, a stone staircase. You can see that it's all directly down. The tide was down a little bit now, and you can see obviously where it does come up and obviously lap that wall. Next. Just walking back across, looking back up, you see a gate above, you see the existing fence that runs along the property. It's a newer one with the redevelopment that went in. And we see the pre-existing staircase. Next. This is the dock in question. I'm looking at it from standing down on the, right on the shoreline. I'm not up on the ramp here. Next. Now I've climbed up on I'm up here where the launch ramp would be. I'm looking back down towards the bay, and you can see that this roadway that was behind that gate takes you right down. There's some crushed concrete right down at the bottom. you to push the trailer out into the water if you were launching a boat. Next. The little shed there, just on the water side of that fence, does show up on the survey. It's just a little probably equipment storage, or boat storage equipment. Next. I'm standing now, I walked my way down to, again, you can see the launching ramp to my right. You can see that there's a ramp that allows you to go from out onto the dock from that area, from that launch room, and you can walk out onto the dock from there. Next. Now I'm standing on right in front of that ramp. So here's a ramp that leads to the dock that can go out to access your boat. Next. And from the ramp itself, or from the dock, just as I'm stepping onto it, I just wanted to show you the length of this. This is not in contention here tonight, but it's quite an improvement right down along the water, and it obviously has been there for a good deal of time. Next. And then I just turned and looked the other way. So now you can see I'm at the launch ramp, and there's that gate that's up above. So there's access to the bay, to the lake, and there's the dock area that's been improved and it's in question tonight. Next. Again, walking back up. Next. Or what else I did? Oh, I did something with the house. Here we are looking from there back at the house. You see that the house is set back. This was part of a redevelopment from some years ago. This has been in front of the board before. So the house, the pool, and some of these other improvements were all approved in an earlier application. Next. And I just walked up to show that there's a pool there and some improvements. You get an idea of the kind of development that's here and the condition it's in. It's all in very nice, well-maintained shape. It's a well-maintained and attractive property. Next. And then just a shot along the south side of the house. It's just an alleyway up to a gate that takes you along between that and the adjoining property or the neighboring property. That could be it. Is that it? I think that's it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. Hi. First question, how much time do I have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. My name is Taylor Sturm from Beeline Associates, Senior Project Scientist. I swear to tell the truth and...
Yeah, swear to tell the truth.
So help me God, yeah. Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public, Chairman. My name is Taylor Sturm, like I just mentioned. I'm here on behalf of Nevins Bennett LLC, who are also here tonight for their property at 289 Eastlake Drive, as was just showed by the photos from Mr. Johan. Thank you very much for that. Cut down my description of the property a little bit. As you noticed, the property, which is also a large part of the underwater lands of Lake Montauk, is improved by an existing dock. And there's a good chance Mr. Frank will talk about this in a little while, but this was before the board about a decade ago, and that does predate my involvement with this project. But as I understand it, during that time of the upland redevelopment, the ZBA was not able to fully confirm the extent of the existing dock in terms of its legality, or at least that's what the decision was. And so I think what had happened based on the review of the technical memo that Mr. Frank put together was that there's a 2003 C of O for this property, and that 2003 C of O shows basically a dock in this shape. It's about 38 feet long, and it's called out as dock. The C of O also calls it dock. So the information is sort of nebulous, and that's further combined, at least in my review, by the fact that the Wallbridge survey that is associated with the C of O was originally done in January. And a lot of this is spelled out in some of the information that I had provided. And as I'm sure all of you know, large parts of docks, whether they be floats, whether they be seasonal platforms and so on, are typically removed in January. It looks like when the C of O was done, it included a lot of the upland information, but I don't know if the dock was ever resurveyed. So all of this is just to say there's a little bit of confusion, and it's understandable about the dock, but it has existed since at least the late 1970s. You can see it very well on the 1978 aerial, winter of 1978, I think it was March or April. So certainly existing from at least the previous year. And I know the DEC also did agree that it predates their tidal wetland regs. The point of me saying all this is not necessarily to talk about the extent of the pier as it exists, but really to refer to the zoning code. Obviously, you all know the zoning code very well, so maybe just mentioning this is not for your edification. This is for the public or anyone who might be listening. Chapter 255, I think it's section 5-51, that outlines in like subsection H, it's called, the natural resource special permit conditions that you need to follow if you're applying for a dock or pier in East Hampton. It's separated into two very distinct paths. One is if there is an existing pier, you're allowed to replace that dock or rebuild it. And it says specifically replace it with a new dock. It doesn't say it has to be in kind in place. It doesn't say it has to be in the same location. It just says, at least in my interpretation of the code, which I understand that's not necessarily my job here, is that you are able to replace it with a dock. So the point of me saying all of this is understanding that there is a lawfully existing pier that in 2013 the ZBA agreed was, at best they could tell, 38 feet long. So in our original application, we found it to be totally within reason to apply for a new dock, as that code says that we're allowed to do, but one that's slightly longer to get you to suitable water depths, to bring in a boat, to have a 6-foot by 20-foot float, which is standard across New York State. Very typical, all above board as far as we were considering. In the technical memo that Mr. Frank provided, it did go through a number of environmental concerns, some of which I would, as a biologist who's been on the site many times and done surveys and so on looking for submerged vegetation, I would say that we made a diligent effort to check to see if there was any zostera grasses and so on within this area, shellfish beds and so on. Did not find any. There are some other, I would say, quantitative aspects of the code too, talking about environmental impacts and especially things like view sheds and things of that nature, understanding that it's a sensitive area in Lake Montauk. So something like that, the intrinsic lengthening of the dock is hard for me to get up and say, well, that's not going to happen, right? The view is not going to be changed in some capacity, whether it be minor, which is what I would say, or otherwise. So taking that in mind, and I'm sure you've all had time to review the updated application materials, the applicants have proposed a compromising structure. So no longer, and this is based on maybe my September 14th submission, no longer are they proposing to lengthen the dock. Instead, it's proposed to be widened by 1 foot on either side at the 15 feet, the terminus 15 feet of the dock. What that will allow is the structure to act as a 6-foot wide floating dock. It will allow them being the applicants and them being, and no one should take this the wrong way, senior adults walking out at the tip of a 4-foot pier. That can be, if it's slippery, it's dangerous. There's a reason why a 6-foot wide landing is standard across New York State. It's because getting on and off a boat on a 4-foot wide plank, it's sort of like, it's like walking the plank, you know, coming off a pirate ship or something. So what this will allow is for the end of the pier to act as a safe landing point. It will allow it to act as a place where children and older adults are able to get on and off boats as is their want and as is the function of this pier, while also allowing that to be safe and limiting any of the future extension laterally into Lake Montauk, because that lateral extension seemed to be the basis for most of the concerns in the technical manual. So this is what is now being proposed, and if the board has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, and certainly if any members of the public do too.
Just a question that I have is, you mentioned earlier as a biologist, you know, you look at whether or not there's shellfish or whatever, but could it be that there's no shellfish today because of the degrading water qualities over the development of time, that there was shellfish there at one point? So my point is to say that the standard today is there's no shellfish, so therefore, I think is misleading.
I do not disagree with you, but I think the reason for any sort of degradation of habitat is something that maybe Mr. Van Dam would like to come back and talk about. I think it has something more to do with the general water quality of Long Island as a whole. I think a pier like this is not, especially given the fact that Lake Montauk is known for not having many piers, is not the cause of any water quality issues. And speaking frankly, I've seen many times where there are piers that sort of benefit shellfish in terms of providing structure and habitat for them to adhere to. certainly not clams, but other ones.
Well, we've had others present that as potential arguments for its peers, and, increasing some environmental potential for certain species, but there's always a larger picture to this, and what you observe on any given day, is empirical, not scientific. And so what's going on in the lake on a continuing fluid basis is something that's of a much larger picture. So whenever we have somebody talk about the impact of a dock based on casual observations, they're not really going to weigh very heavily long term. I understand where you're coming from, and I know what it looks like there. I was down on the dock myself, but nonetheless, there are other considerations, and that's why the zoning around docks have been so specific in this town. So that's something we look at. We look at that. What was the legislative intent when these were provided for us as guidelines, and where do we go from there? But separate of that, pulling back on the extension on here, we'll see what the planner has to say about this as an alternative. But that's on the surface of it is certainly
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. If I can just respond to what you said, I do agree about the empirical evidence not necessarily being entirely scientific. But when it does come to certain repeated surveys and transects and point counts and so on, we did try our best to it, not to say, oh, we went out once and we didn't see anything, but really provide some, at least an ecological snapshot of the last decade or something like that. So, but thank you.
questions. Anybody else?
I'm good. I'm going to hear from Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman again, board members, Brian Frank still. But before I get into the presentation here, I'd like to compliment Mr. Sturm. I've been working with him on this application since it was submitted. And I think we've agreed on nothing over that time, but he has been professional and responsive and courteous, and I want to acknowledge that. So we still may not agree on anything, but anyway, I wanted to mention that. So I'm familiar with this property. I kind of inherited this application after a colleague left the planning department in 2013. So I spoke at the public hearing for the redevelopment of this property in 2013, and I recognized that Mr. Sturm was not involved in the application at that time, but the principal of Beelang Associates, Michael Bonci, was also, a pretty good environmental scientist in his own right, and discussed what they, pardon me, what they believed were the merits or why the application, part of the application should consider an enlargement of the dock. At the time it had, I've got the history in there, it was flared out, there was a platform there that was not proposed to remain, there were proposed, it was going to be narrowed and lengthened, I think about 89 feet. And there are a couple of things that I do agree with Mr. Sturm on, and that is the fact that the natural resource special permit guidelines, as they apply to the repair or reconstruction of a fixed dock, are a lot more vague than they are for a floating dock. But where I do pretty vehemently disagree is with the concept that there was ever any legal pre-existing dock other than what you saw on the survey in the application. This property was originally developed in 1971. At that time, a dock would have needed a building permit. After 1984, a dock would have needed a natural resources special permit in addition to a building permit. It's still not very clear when the dock was initially constructed. It really only shows up on a 2003 certificate of occupancy. Mr. Sturm is correct, seasonal docks are seasonally removed, but they're usually anchored to pilings that remain in place. And there's no evidence of any pilings offshore. There's no building permit for any dock on here. There's no reference to a dock other than the 2003 certificate of occupancy. This was discussed at length by the board as part of the redevelopment. There was a lot going on in the application. The redevelopment was a retreat. I could show you, it's kind of moot because we're not really talking about the upland stuff, but the property was improved with a large footprint, one-story house, a very large garage. The entire lot was cleared. And the improvements that you saw in Member Johann's photos are a reflection of the redevelopment that was authorized by this board in 2013. But at that time, the board did consider an addition to the fixed dock and found that it failed to meet the natural resource special permit standards. There's been no documented change in circumstances since then. The environmental conditions in that area remain comparable to what they were in 2013. There has been a degradation of water quality throughout Lake Montauk. This northeastern corner was one of the last refuge for eelgrass and other submerged aquatic vegetation, and that has winnowed away, and it is obviously an aspiration of the town as well as the Peconic Estuary Program to see the reestablishment of seagrasses in this area as well as other areas of the harbor. And the construction of docks in this area, and I'm not necessarily talking about the new proposal right now, but will hamper that. Docks, more often than not, interfere with water circulation. They disturb bottom sediments. They alter the flow of water circulation, and they serve as a substrate for more fouling organisms than beneficial organisms. This isn't going to have blue mussels and oysters on it. It's going to have tunicates and stuff that really whose contribution to the marine ecosystem is either not well established, or in some cases of the tunicates, they're non-native, they're invasive. They're a problem. They're just more of a fouling organism than anything else. Our town code standards for dock widths is 5 feet. This is a much more minor change to the dock, and I will compliment the owners as well as their team in bringing something more reasonable to the board to consider than the prior proposal. But I do think at the end of the day, the board has to do something that they're comfortable doing on other properties. And there really doesn't seem to be a strong basis for widening the dock beyond 5 feet, if at all. Not sympathetic to somebody who wants a safer base, but these permits run with the land. They're not issued necessarily to the individual that occupies the property at that time, and that's something the board has to be mindful of. If you do this, or even widen it out to 5 feet on this property, you do have to be reasonably expect other properties with a fixed dock to come and ask for the same thing on the same basis, and that's something that I think the board has to be cautious about in considering changes to a dock that's already there. As Mr. Sturm mentioned, there are not many docks in this area, but there are a lot of boats in this area, and most boaters that don't have docks, because it is so shallow in this area for such a far distance out, are able to use moorings and dinghies, and quite frankly, you'll see people wade out there and grab the boat off the mooring and pull it into on board. Again, this is a much more modest change to the property, but it still has to meet the natural resource special permit standards. I think while Mr. Sturm is here, it's important to address if any modifications to the stringers or the pilings would be necessary to support that flare, even if it is limited to, instead of the 6 foot width that's proposed, the 5 foot width, which is the code standard. Beyond that, if there's any questions I can answer, I will.
Do we have a building section on that? Have you seen a building section on this proposed?
I believe we do.
We have it. I have it here. This is the previous one. This is the expanded one.
So unless I'm misreading it, excuse me.
Yeah.
It looks like the it looks like the dock would, at the end, would basically be reconstructed with the pilings wider to accommodate this, flare, for lack of a better description.
I think it's a section of the previous. Yeah.
We're proposing 6 feet.
No, this is attached to September 14th.
Yeah, it's on September 14th, so.
I can step down and maybe Mr. Sturm is better suited to answer these questions.
Before you do, does anybody else have any question?
Well,
I don't think.
what is the dock today?
4 feet, 4 by 38.
4 by?
38.
Yeah. It's not long gonna be. It's going to be existing 38. That's good.
So let's get this straight. So the request is to remove what's there and widen it and build it?
I think I'm going to let the applicant address that.
That's the question.
Maybe we should get him back in.
Sorry.
You say that 6 feet is what New York State recommends?
The New York State DEC does indeed recommend a 6 by 20 floating dock. That's sort of the standard or maximum standard that they typically allow. Mr. Frank mentioned 5 foot wide being the standard in East Hampton. I understand that as being the width of a floating dock per the Natural Resource Special Permit code, not necessarily a pier, because in actuality, the code says.
Wouldn't the intent of that code mean that if you have a fixed dock that's pre-existing, that you have the right to rebuild it in kind? I think that's the intent of that code, not to expand it or whatever. So it basically it's saying that you have a fixed dock, we'll grant you the fixed dock, but it's there to. I believe that's the intent of the code.
That well may be, but I would also counter that just by saying that in those cases, typically the docks are, I would imagine, more useful. And in this case, when the dock is so short, you can't reach adequate water depths, you can't have a float. I have been on many, many docks, both designing them, being on them professionally, being on them privately in my personal life, and I don't know very many short 4 foot wide piers that go nowhere. Typically, a pier is a means to an end. You get to a float, you get to a platform. It's not a structure that you spend time going back and forth standing on. It can be a little bit dangerous. They typically end in a float. And the way that I interpret the code, and I understand that that is certainly your job as a zoning board, is that you're allowed to, if you have a fixed pier, you do not have to, not that it's a lawless nature situation, but you don't have to comply with those codes. You're allowed to put in a new pier. And if presumably some applicant comes in and says, this is the best pier for this location, that's something that would be considered.
So the proposal right now would be to remove what's there and to widen it. So
let me clarify that.
Pilings and everything would be widened.
So I think it would probably be in the best interest of the harbor or the lake and maybe the water quality, if that could possibly be avoided. That's something that maybe I'll have to talk to the applicants about, but this is the kind of structure that could probably be done with hand tools. It's just a matter of taking the through flow decking off, extending the stringers by 1 foot. A 1 foot cantilevered structure beyond the pilings is more than, I mean, that is not nearly long enough where you need additional structure. So in theory, you could keep the pilings where they are, cut them below the grade of the deck and just extend the deck 1 foot in either direction. You wouldn't come up with any real engineering concerns with that at all.
That's not the section we have in the September 14th.
No, that's something I just made up. I just invented.
That was the question that followed that.
Yeah, not.
Say, are we talking about the removal and reinstallation of pilings, or are we talking about accommodating a deck by making it a full?
I think that's something that I'll certainly have to talk to the applicants about, but this was supposed to be more of a typical, just showing you, here's the 4 foot wide beginning of the pier, here's going to be the 6 foot wide end of the pier. And honestly speaking, frankly, that's until tonight, I didn't consider that you would have to remove the pilings. And I think that maybe there's a way to go about this where you actually can eliminate a good amount of the disturbance of the bottom. Can I maybe just respond to some of the points that Mr. Frank had?
Are we done with Brian?
Oh,
Are you done, Brian? Are you done with your presentation? Did we set you off before you were done?
No, I'm done. So not to continue our disagreements, but I just wanted to maybe reply to a couple of things that Brian said. I definitely agree that it is very confusing and sort of nebulous looking back in the past in terms of what was there. But in the 1996 Walbridge survey that accompanies that 2003 C of O, there's really no detail regarding the dock at all. It doesn't show any of the pilings that are associated with the dock. And indeed, it doesn't show any tie-off pilings that should be associated with a float or a platform or something. But I have an aerial photograph here from a couple years before that clearly shows the pilings that were there when the structure was removed. I don't know if that's something that the board is interested in, but I think that relying on this Walbridge survey, which does seem to lack details in 1996 and like really, I don't know, using that instead of some of the more, I don't know, the aerial photographs that show otherwise, I think that may be, I don't want to say it's a mistake that the zoning board made making this decision in 2013, because I don't think that's right of me to say, but I think relying on that instead of giving the benefit of the doubt to the homeowners and looking at the aerials, I think was, well, I'll just end it there. But one other thing I want to mention is the C of O from 2003 does say a dock was present. It says, again, dock. But we have aerial photographs from 2001 and 2004. And so that structure on both of those aerials was a much larger structure. So you have to think, did the building inspector go there that day, see the larger structure that was present between 2001 and 2003, and just sign off on it? Did he not look at it? Did he miss it? Or did he think it was illegal and then decided not to issue a violation? I don't know the answer to that. I think probably the most logical way to look at that is just that there had been something there before that was larger, and when the building inspector in 2003 signed off on, again, dock with no measurements whatsoever, it was probably a pier.
But the 1984 NRSB code would have required a permit for it, at minimum. And I think Brian said even earlier, permits were required, but clearly 1984.
Well, I think the structure,
I
think this predates that.
Without a record.
Sure. Well, when you look at the, for example, 1977, 1978 aerial, that same looking structure is there. So again, I had some trouble under the, doing foiling and things like that, trying to really get to the bottom of it. My only point is that I just think that there's probably more to this than any of us know. And I'm not trying to say anyone's wrong or anything like that, just that it's not, I don't know, something about it is just sort of ambiguous. I think that is, I'm just trying to look through my notes of what Brian was just saying, or Mr. Frank, excuse me. Yeah, just really that. I don't know necessarily if the board really needs to be too concerned about setting a precedent in this case. Like I mentioned, I mean, this might be something that you all know much better than I do, but I don't know of too many small fixed piers that go to nowhere. And when you have a situation like this, where it's almost like this property, which is a gorgeous property, and it has this historic dock, and it's one of the only docks on Lake Montauk on this side, at least within a certain stretch, excluding the marinas and so on. It's almost like you have this structure that is almost unusable at this point because it's not safe to walk out on at high tide. You can't have two people out there putting a kayak in the water or something like that. You can't have someone getting on and off a boat if it's too thin. So I think in this case, it is such a unique circumstance where the property owners own the lake bottom, and this is such a unique dock, and it has this sort of interesting history where I don't necessarily know if there's really a precedent issue, but that's my understanding of it.
How much time would it take to get us a revised drawing like the one you suggested?
I think it would just be a matter of a couple days, certainly discussing it with my clients, seeing if they would be okay with an extension of the deck rather than the pilings, and then not very long in terms of the actual drawing.
Any questions?
Well, you're gonna readdress the width then?
In terms of the 5 versus 6, 4
versus 6.
4 versus 6, address it in what way?
Well, today it's 4.
It is, and we're trying to make it a little wider to make it more useful without encroaching further out into the lake. That's sort of the compromise that we're really trying to strike here.
Right, the town code says 5. wouldn't be 5.
It does for floating docks, and I understand the intent of that code, but we're not proposing a floating dock.
And 5 is, being a boater, is a sufficient length.
But he says
To get on and off the boat, safety. I've been doing this my whole life, and
but he says DEC is 6 feet.
They allow.
the DEC. So, yeah, but we're the zoning one,
It's
so
not
the
a
5
requirement.
foot, I'm talking
It's an-
about,
it's an-
to have to reconfigure everything. I don't know, I'm looking at it more like in place and kind,
I see, okay.
instead of reestablishing a whole new, I was thinking out loud.
No, I totally understand that. And that's, when this first came to the zoning board, I think that's what they were trying to do, is understanding that there was a larger footprint in place in the past. Understanding, of course, it again is quite ambiguous, and not to go back into that too much, but when my clients bought this property, there was a much larger structure there, and understanding maybe parts of it weren't necessarily legal, or, again, it could have been ambiguous. When this was originally proposed, it was just a lengthening of the pier, just getting to suitable water depths for a floating dock, just like anywhere else except maybe East Hampton, which I understand has stricter regulations. But, now we're trying to strike a compromise.
Okay, anything else?
So how much time would you need to get back to us with a drawing that reflects the act?
I would say maybe a week or two, something like that, to be safe, in case I have some other stuff. Is that too long?
No, it's too long.
We're just asking what you think. You know what you're dealing with. So when do you think you can get back to us? So 2 weeks would be sufficient for you if we...
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we have to go to the public, right? All right, is there anybody in the public that would like to address this application? Matt, is there anybody on the phone?
You have 0 callers. Thank you.
That's the 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Then the application of Netherlands Bennett LLC, 289 Lake Drive, Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-13-1-6 and 26. I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing to beat the rest of it until October 10th. To allow for the submission of additional detail.
Second.
Concur. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Poley at 54 Firestone Road, Monroe, Suffolk, Mass. Match number 200-17-2-34.1. Size and location is 39,994 square feet, Firestone Road, Monroe. The description is to relocate, renovate, and add to the existing residence, creating a 2,585 square foot residence with approximately 1,194 square feet. Covered porch is approximately 3,000 square foot of clearing. Connect to the existing IE system. Parcel of land which is in wetland. The relief of talk is a natural resources special permit between 5420 of the East Hampton Town. Is required for this application and any other relief necessary. The zoning district is A residence, zoning fund zone, and the secret class is type 2. Council, do we have proper affidavits?
Everything is in order. This is the official notice of posting, the property was properly posted. And this is the top of the driveway, the shared dirt road that goes down. That is property to the left, there's no property across the street. So now I'm standing at the beginning of the applicant's property, and I'm looking back up Firestone Road, that's where the sort of posting sign. And the road here's off to the left there, there's a house across the street, which you will see. Now I've turned and I'm facing, okay, I'm over the direction challenged on Fort Pond Bay. This is north? This would be west. What, Tyler? This is the house toward, well, no, this would be west. This is the house to the west. This is the applicant's property. Okay, next. Now I'm standing again at the beginning of the applicant's property. This is a photo of the house across the street. I'm standing there. And now I'm standing in the parking area. You can see the overhead wires in the distance. On the survey, you can see the overhead wires leaning there. And on the prior picture, there was another old utility pole that you could hardly see actually in the photo. And this is the current house, the existing house that they're going to pick up partially with someone. Like more information on that. Picking it up and moving it back on the property. Next. It's another shot of, in that same general direction, and just another slightly view. See the limit of clearing toward the east side there. And next. Okay, now we've gone out beyond the fence, at the existing fence that's there, and I'm shooting across from the west toward the northeast in the area where the house is proposed to, the new house is proposed to build. And instead of slightly closer down toward the existing house today, shooting across from the west to the east, the area where the house is proposed to be built. And in the distance, in that shrubbery, where the new OWTS sanitary system is put in. You can see that on the survey. Next. And this is the west side of the house. And I'm going to walk down toward the shore, even though the shoreline is the application for it. To show you, this house had there were renovations that were approved to the roof line years ago. This is the following. This is where the OWTS septic system was put in with the last project that we had. And again, I'm shooting still in the easterly direction. There's a lot of, there are invasives in there, but basically I think that's along the property line. Next. And now I've walked down to the house where you did the existing house. You can see the masonry stepping stone walk on the survey, the deck, and I'm standing there shooting back toward the direction of the new home. Next. It's a better shot of the house to the west, the nearest neighbor to the west on the property. And now I've gone to toward the water side, and this is a shot of the existing home as it looks today. After the last project, the improvements that were made on it. Next. And this is the walkway down to the shore. And we're going to walk down there because it is a beautiful property, and it was a nice day. So the walkway narrows down as you get toward the shore and toward Fort Pond Bay. Next. And you can see Fort Pond Bay here looking toward the west. And the next shot, you should be looking in the other direction toward the east, northeast. And it's a very beautiful shoreline. Next. And it's the final shot of the shoreline that I just took because it was nice. Next. And now walking back up, this walkway is wider than 4 feet, but I believe, and Kyle can confirm that that the zoning board had allowed it to be this width to accommodate the surfboards. And next.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
It's another beautiful area in the neighborhood.
Oh, just one thing, the survey I'm looking at was received December 20th, 2022. If you just confirm, that is the latest one. That's the one I have.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Last but not least, certainly, I just want to point out, I don't know when Terry took those photos, but it's reassuring to see the sun. I haven't seen it.
It was the day before the storm.
Okay. It's still coming. Any event, I'm here tonight representing Stonefire Sunset and Chris Poley. He's the owner of the property located at 54 Firestone Road, seeking approval to relocate and construct additions to the property in locations that conform with the wetland setbacks, and for approval to use the existing AI sanitary system for the residents. Joel Halsey is also here with me tonight, as is Chris, the owner and occupant of the house, in case you have any questions that I can't answer. There are a lot of moving parts on this property. I'm going to try to explain quickly that'll make this application much easier for the board to understand, and also clarify why I think this application is really a great candidate for the issuance of a natural resource special permit. This is an old house, probably from the 40s. It's also structurally sound. My client has every intention of reusing the residence, and the relocation of this to the upland area has been evaluated and deemed feasible by several house moving companies, including Dawn House Movers. It's the one that I'm most familiar with. They specialize in this type of work. Essentially, they would crib the structure, sled it up. I'm sure Roy has seen it done. It's pretty amazing to me. But on a this is a very small house. I think it's 900 square feet. So I've seen them actually do it with much larger structures. The property, as was mentioned, was in front of the ZBA in 2019. I wasn't involved with the applications at that time. That was when Chris recently acquired the property and began renovations to the house. Basically, they replaced some of the decking as well as the roof that was pretty neglected on the structure. The structure itself, they replaced the roof. The removal of the roof probably required nothing other than a building permit, but at the time there were some dormers in the roof that were proposed to be removed. That's not a replacement in kind, and that's why it came in front of the zoning board. But I think you probably could have replaced the roof with a building permit as a reconstruction it wouldn't be a reconstruction of the structure, it would have been a reconstruction of a portion of the structure probably within it. I have a copy of the original ZBA decision, but I'm sure you do as well. It was deemed to be a very minor project with minimal impact to the protected features in the actual decision. ZBA also approved some additional decking at the time, but I think even the TAM from 2019 recognized that additional thought should be given to any future development or redevelopment of the property, to this property, basically encouraging the property owner to increase his conformity to wetland setbacks. That was one of the concerns with respect to some of the additional decking. At the time, public water was not available to this, and the surrounding residents had wells to provide their water service. Subsequent to this decision by the ZBA, public water was in fact made available to these homes, and that helps free up some of the areas for replacement of sanitary systems. You didn't have the requirement of wells, et cetera. Essentially, what was predicted in the TAM and suggested by the planners at that hearing was followed. As an alternative to expanding the residence up to the 50% allowable that the board can hear a variance for, the landowner proposed to retreat the structure to render it more conforming. Our current proposal shows the house at a compliant 100 feet from the wetland setback. Pretty significant voluntary mitigation from this homeowner. The existing improvements will be removed and the prior disturbed area revegetated, and increasing our vegetated buffer. We're removing this house back by about 75 feet, a significant distance that speaks to the mitigation. However, the one thing that the TAM didn't accurately state is the replacement of the sanitary system on this property was not in fact it wasn't required by the ZBA application. It was voluntarily replaced by the landowner once they had public water available. The prior ZBA application didn't implicate the sanitary system at all. It was just replacing the roof and some exterior decks, and there was no nexus to the sanitary system. The legally existing sanitary system on this property was a concrete block cesspool. It wasn't even a sanitary system as we would call it today. The owner, Chris, wanted to replace this as soon as he could. With the addition of public water, it became easier. You didn't have to abandon and drill a new well. well. It just basically all those pieces fell into place. Replacing the sanitary was a dramatic improvement to the environmental conditions on the property that are used by the existing residents. But there are limits on where it could be located to service the existing house. It had to maintain a gravity-fed system. It's frankly impossible to relocate to the far corner or much farther upland. It could be even 90 feet if you really wanted to. And I can explain that really wasn't a viable option at the time or even today. Essentially, the system was replaced on the upland side of the house as far east as it could be without having to use an injection pit or other type of powered system to lift the waste. And even if they had done this, it would have made relocation, basically you would be burning up the conforming area that you would want its structure to be moved into. This house location would have, I suppose you could have lifted it and put it there, but we'd be basically having the same discussion tonight. Another thing that's not readily apparent from the surveys are the multitude of access points along that road, Firestone Road, as it used to be called, and the water lines that are located on the east side of the house, as well as the need to have access to this house. It's kind of a strange driveway configuration. If you look at the survey, you would get the impression that the house is set back from the eastern property line. But there's a hedge on the survey that basically is required to remain undisturbed. That's sort of where access to the neighboring property comes in. And the parking lot, as well as the circulation for this house on the east side of the residence, can't really accommodate additional structures. That's what's needed to provide access. I did want to submit a copy of this survey, and on this survey, what I did is I just highlighted the existing water lines that are on the property. I didn't want to waste paper, so the first one's blue. The second one, I just used a highlighter just to show the water lines rather than reprinting or recopying it. So, but it does show that there are water lines that affect the rear of that property, which would be one likely spot you'd want to put an upgraded sanitary system. And you would, if you did that, it would conflict with the water lines as well as some of the other water lines that serve the adjacent properties. And it would also be under a driveway and push the sanitary unacceptably close to the proposed house. Basically, the upgraded IEA sanitary system is probably the most viable location to service the relocated house based on all these constraints. It just so happens that the existing sanitary and the one we want to use work both for the existing house as well as for the relocated house. Bit of a strange coincidence. One thing I did want to mention that this is an IEA system, which basically reduces nitrogen by about 90% over a conventional septic system. Part of the reason the town required additional horizontal distance between wetlands and sanitary systems was due to the inability at the time to effectively reduce the effluent and its harmful impacts. The thinking was that if there was leakage of effluent, side leakage or bentonite, the best protection we could do would be providing more horizontal separation that would cause this waste to have to travel a greater distance. Today, sanitary systems are required to maintain a hydrostatic connection to groundwater. In many cases, that via wicking and installation of suitable substrate, and this system reduces the actual pollutant of concern, nitrogen, by about 90%. It may be time to revisit the greater sanitary setbacks that are imposed solely by the town. The DEC and the health department both enforce a 100-foot setback, for instance, and that was a regulation generated even before IEA systems. But the increase in horizontal setback in this case doesn't actually justify or quantify a greater setback, as it always reduced the projected impacts that was used to create this setback. I did want to submit a copy of a letter that was prepared by the architects, and I have a copy of that right here, that basically evaluated some of these other sanitary locations, and it does kind of go down, hey, water line, gravity fed, a couple of the other concerns, parking and access, et cetera. I didn't receive this until today, so I'll apologize. I'm submitting it now, but I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It just kind of takes down the things that you would want to do, including maintaining gravity fed. Based on all these considerations, I think it makes the most sense to provide for the greatest setback for the relocated residents and expanded residents, and to continue to use the existing sanitary system that was just replaced. It's new and modern. It won't affect the parking of the house or conflict with the water line servicing adjacent properties, and it will provide an enormous benefit overall. we're retreating by this house by about 75 feet. And basically providing a significant environmental benefit that I think this application really parrots. The sanitary system will service this house, it's servicing the existing house in a manner that I think is, consistent with the NRSP regulations and the town code. Other than that, I'm available to answer any questions you might have. I think this project is an overall.
More demolishing.
What's that?
More demolishing the current rate.
No, it's moving it.
It's moving, that's actually being picked up. I believe that
Plan.
there has to be demolition just to crib this thing up and remove it and remove the structures, but the applicant invested in this house. I mean, it's a really nice house and it's structurally sound. He has no intention to demolish it per se.
Okay, and now the current house has how many bedrooms?
It's 900 square feet.
Less than that, it's about 800.
It's about 800 square feet, so.
2 bedrooms.
2 very small, I would guess.
And the new house will have.
Is it 4? I think it's a.
No, it's going to be
I can't talk from this.
as many as 3 bedrooms.
So it's 3 bedroom, but the sanitary system, I believe right now, the minimum size system you can submit and get approval for is a 4 bedroom. So it's a 4 bedroom system today and it will be, but I think the plans show 3 bedroom. There was also a concern or a question raised that is shown on the plans. There is a portion of the foundation just because of the topography on the lot. I think it's like 200 square feet. That is considered gross floor area of the basement area that's shown on the plans, but that is accounted for in our plans adequately. It's just that portion is 4 feet or more above grade, but it's a very small area of the proposed foundation.
And will you be revegetating over the?
Yes, I believe there's plans. But we don't have a plan yet, but that's what we would do as a condition of approval is submit the plan that would in fact encompass the area of all these existing improvements.
Any other questions?
Well, in project conditions is recommending a scenic easement. You don't have them today, right?
I don't believe there is a scenic easement on the property today, and we would be entirely consistent as long as it maintains a path to the water. Excuse me?
You are proposing one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's right here on this one.
Any other questions? Any access to the shoreline will have to be on the north side of the house now in the future because the arborvitae is going to come fairly close. It doesn't affect our decision here. I'm just noticing that the house is fairly tight to the arborvitae on the south. So any future, anything has to be done on behalf of the.
What's that?
We're not changing the access.
Yeah, we don't plan to change the access that's there right now. That's functional. It's pretty narrow at the front, and I don't think it was put in by this applicant in any event. It was probably long existing.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay.
Tyler?
Tyler Borsak for the planning department.
Tyler, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do. I will try to be as brief as I can. So the parcel is located at the northwest end of Firestone Road, fronting Fort Pond Bay and Montauk. The current application is requesting approvals in order to relocate the existing residents more landward on the property, renovate and construct additions along with decking and porches. The lot is currently improved on approximately 900 square foot existing one-story residence, which is located approximately 33 feet from the edge of wetlands to the west. The property is within jurisdiction of several high-quality natural features, including a dune that borders the entire western side of the parcel, freshwater wetlands within close proximity to the existing improvements, and tidal wetlands. The tidal wetlands are the surface waters of Fort Pond Bay, which is a well-flushed open bay. Wetlands within jurisdiction of this project are freshwater wetlands, which are just landward of the coastal dune to the west, which extends up to the bottom of the hill close to the residence as it exists today. And that depression lies around an elevation of about 5 feet. These wetlands can be expected to provide all the benefits typically associated with quality wetlands, the provision of diverse, high-quality wetland plant and wildlife habitats, the attenuation of floodwaters, and the removal of pollutants prior to groundwater and surface water recharge. The proposed project includes relocating the existing residence approximately 75 feet landward of its existing position, renovating the existing structures and constructing additions. The project is also proposing to additional decking and porches. The existing IA sanitary system, which was installed as part of the prior ZBA approval on this property, or was not proposed part of the approval, but was constructed after the approval, is proposed to remain. There are better locations for the sanitary system, and certainly the information that was provided should be considered. The board may want to discuss if relocating the system to meet better wetland setbacks is appropriate given the scale of the work, or if allowing it to remain is sufficient given the mitigation being offered and the reasoning provided. And, the reasons for continuing its utilization are also obvious given that it was upgraded so recently. Overall, the proposed project is a significant increase in the size of the existing residence, but in a conforming location on the property. The board should examine the size increase of the residence and compare it to the mitigation being offered. The relocation of the residence to meet a 100-foot wetland setback is an improvement on the property, as is expected from a redevelopment of a constrained parcel. The project is proposing several other improvements that will reduce or eliminate nonconformities and reduce the impacts of the existing and proposed structures, such as a revegetation beyond the town code 50-foot minimum clearing setback. As additional mitigation, the planning department had recommended a scenic easement across the entire western side of the parcel, including part of that 50-foot wetland buffer that's proposed. An easement will help provide the highest protection measures that the ZBA can utilize to protect the freshwater and tidal wetlands, dune, and the existing reestablished vegetation buffers in perpetuity. With the included mitigation measures, the project, including the increases in size of the residence, should be sufficiently mitigated to limit the impacts of the proposed improvements. And I do one thing to note that there's a February 2023 survey in the board's file. The only difference was it showed the sanitary connection for the new house to the existing sanitary. That was the only change. So there is a more up-to-date survey, but it's only a very minor change on there.
I don't know where that came from.
Any questions for Tyler?
Tyler, could you just show us the reveg area and
Revegetation, obviously this is where the existing residence is. The revegetation is, I believe, up to here. This line here is the new clearing line, I believe, if I'm reading it, if I'm remembering it correctly. So it would be essentially this entire area down here, well within wetland setbacks, which gets them to right around 50 feet from the edge of wetlands. As far as scenic easement, we had included a sketch which went up to around the same area, a little shy of their re-veg area, but that was our suggested revegetation area or scenic easement.
Any other questions?
The access to the bay will still be allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, allowing for an access to remain or is obviously reasonable, and to potentially allow any improvements to the access if the board feels that that's needed. It's not a very steep slope there though, so I don't think there's ever going to be a need for stairs or anything like that. It's pretty gradual, so I don't think that's necessary.
Thank you. Further questions?
Thank you.
Any brief recap or, is there anybody in the public? Not here, Matt, any on the phone?
You have 0 callers, thank you.
Well, and I think if you look at the mitigation, this is a pretty good project. The house isn't being expanded, it's a larger house, but 900 or less than 900 square feet would be it's a garage. I can't imagine how Chris has been living in there for a while, but maybe he's got small friends. I think the house is commensurate with it's much smaller than some of the adjacent properties. And I think you could compare this to the other alternative under our town code, which would be, build a landward, 400 square foot addition on the house. I think you're going to accomplish much greater good by considering this relocation, expansion, revegetation and abandonment of the existing nonconformities. Basically, there's a lot of positives on this equation.
Okay, I just want to, on the survey, I have a survey to receive December 20th, 2022. And then this one says received February 15th, 2023. Tyler, this is the one that has a difference?
The only difference is that it shows the sanitary line connecting the house to the old system.
Oh, okay.
That's the only tangible difference.
I can show you the, yeah, I see, I see the line, but where's the revision date?
On the top right.
Oh, okay, it is there, okay. I had to look, very small. All right, then for the application of Chris Foley, 54 Firestone Road in Montville, Hampton, 200-017-033-34, California. Make a motion to close the public hearing then. Okay.
Concur. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If we had only been first.
All right, moving on. Next, we have Laura McCall, 52 Tiger Road, now Kansas, assessment number 300-109-1-8. The size and location is 44,983 square foot at 52 Private Road, Amagansett. Description is to install a new generator, a propane tank on a parcel of land with wetlands, surface waters, dune and dune vegetation. The leaf sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420 of the East Hampton Town Code, and one variance is required for this application. One variance of 23 feet is required from 255-440 of the Town Code to install the generator 77 feet from the dune crest where 100-foot setback is required. Any other relief necessary. The zoning district is A residence, 8E flood zone, elevation 10, the secret class is type 2.
My pictures are slightly out of sequence. So this is looking, this property is at the end of private road that has a little cul-de-sac and a turnaround. So this is looking to if you're standing in the driveway is to the right. And this is looking out to one side of the driveway. Next. And this is looking the other way down private road. As you can see, it's not a finished road. Sorry. Next. This is looking at the house. The owner was there the day I went, which was Saturday, and says he just got a C of O. So, Kyler, there's a new C of O in the file, apparently. Next. As you can see, they're finishing construction, so there's still the porta stand there. The green grassy area, if you look at the survey dated last revised 12/27/22, it shows you where the generator and the proposed generator is going, which is in that area. Next. That's sort of the area that the generator is going. It's pretty, for the most part, it's been left wild. And it actually looks pretty amazing given that they just finished construction there. Next. This is looking underneath the house. It's now FEMA compliant, and the shower is to the left there. Next. That's my dog walking down the walkway. That pig. Next. That's looking back from the walkway. They still have some of the project limiting fence stuff up. Next. This is looking underneath the house. The deck is on top. Next.
FEMA compliant swings.
Yeah, that's my husband on the walkway chasing the dog. Next. That's looking back at the house, and the area on the survey, there's noted a proposed addition to the deck, but I don't see that as part of the application. So I guess because we don't have, we're not commenting on that. Next. That's looking back at the house, a little, full house looking back at it. Next. That's going around the underside of the house. Next. That's looking back towards Napi. Next. That's looking towards the driveway from the house. Next. And the sign, it turns out, was at the beginning of private road, not by the house. But I assume that's okay. Jameson?
Should have been 2 signs.
There were 2 signs.
There should have been one at the driveway too.
No, I didn't find one at the driveway, but this was the day that it was raining and blowing and everything, so that's it. There was a stick by the fire hydrant. Maybe
it flew off.
Maybe it blew off.
I didn't actually go back and check after the storm.
It's a beautiful house.
You swear firm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, and the truth is, this should have been first. You guys did it in reverse order today. I'll try to be quick with the final presentation. It was delirious. Good evening, Chairman Deline, board members. Joel Halsey on behalf of Lighthouse Land Planning, representing the property owner, Laura McCall. On these properties, when it comes to these private roads, and I get a little leery about posting, so I usually try to post where people can see it in the public, because most people aren't going to drive down the private road and next to the house. And the one on the road, I actually put the property address on it, so I'm trying to overpost the private road properties. The application before the board is for a single variance and a natural resource special permit for the construction of a generator, a very modest structure to a large property that has been well maintained. Even during the construction of this property, this was one of the prettiest construction sites I've ever seen, just because they did a very good job at being clean. And not making a mess. And so as we all know, the reasoning for generators is that power during a power outage. Also, as we all know, power outages are common occurrences out here, even during a modest storm. As more and more houses are built with the on-site waste treatment sanitary systems, generators may become more prevalent. These systems require power to, these AI systems require power to function properly. As the added benefit, powering the house during an power outage, it will also power the AI water treatment system, wastewater treatment system, and help keep the system functioning properly. This generator was proposed within the most practical location. The location is close to the improvements on the property, including the existing electric panel. Locating the generator here also helps reduce the disturbance. It does not appear that the planning department has an issue with the application as proposed. It was discussed within the technical analysis memo. If no new variance was required, this could have been a good candidate for an administrative natural resource special permit. We do believe that this project complies with all the variance standards as outlined in the recent memo I submitted to the board. Trying to be brief. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
The survey that we're looking at is sort of confusing.
All the proposals?
Where are we supposed to, like, there's a lot of proposed stuff.
All that proposed stuff was previously approved by the board.
Okay, as long as that's the case.
Yeah, this was prior to the work, I submitted the application, almost, a while ago. This was way before the application.
The application, I just want to make sure that this survey doesn't.
Yeah, so this was submitted January 17th, 2023. And I think we just recently went for the CO. So yeah, everything that you see on there
is no longer proposed.
Yeah, the owner said he just received the CO. He was very happy. He's like, so why are you here?
He thinks he's getting busted or something.
To be clear about it, the only thing we're considering is the location.
The generator, yep, exactly.
Any other questions?
Quick, Tyler Borsek for the planning department again. So yeah, the proposed work is for a generator. We probably would have considered to be a modification of the original approval, really, if it didn't require a new variance. It's a very minor change in close proximity to the existing structures. Overall, the proposed structures are in close proximity to those existing improvements, and just doesn't appear to be any significant impacts that are not already associated with those existing on the parcel. And I had been on the parcel to sign off on a CO somewhat recently, and the revegetation that's been done on the property is fantastic. So we don't have any concerns with the application.
Thank you. You've seen the CO.
Yeah, I was there to sign off on the issuance of one, yeah.
Thank you. Matt, anybody on the phone?
0 callers, thank you.
Matter of Laura Macco, 52 Private Road, Amagansett, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-109-01-08. I make a motion to close the public hearing and the public record.
Seconded.
Good night, everybody.
I concur. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. With that, we go to work session. There's no administrative applications, Tyler?
No.
So we have a building permit certificate of occupancy at Heidi Ho, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-85-1-6 at 212 Shore Road, Narragansett. Tyler, you want to give us a brief on this?
So Brian wrote the memo to the board on this. I'll just read the pertinent paragraph and then show you the pictures associated with it. So this was originally approved back in 2020 for the reconfiguration of 500 square feet of decking on a parcel of land containing primary dunes and beach vegetation. So the approved survey proposed reducing building coverage on the lot by about 10 square feet, or I'm sorry, 57 square feet. One of the issues is that on the current survey, the building coverage was increased by about 10 square feet rather than being reduced by 57 square feet. So minor change in the building coverage, and we couldn't figure out where that came from. I think it was just probably overhangs or something along those lines. And condition K4F of the determination required that all areas disturbed by construction activities to be revegetated with beach grass planted on 18-inch centers. It appears that native dune land soils were retained on site, and most of the property, including the north side of the residence closest to the dune crest, was revegetated with beach grass. Some areas of the property have been revegetated with an exemplary mix of dune land species, and there are some non-native areas consisting of beach rose or Rosa rugosa and Torrelusa junipers. The planning department is satisfied with the revegetation, is consistent with the spirit of the permit condition. And then the other issue was the coverage number. So there was enough discrepancy that we weren't comfortable just signing off on it ourselves, and we wanted to bring it to the board. There are some photos showing some of the revegetation. Obviously, this is mostly beach grass in this area. Similar here, there's some beach plum and bayberry, and that's facing north on the west side. Yeah, the west side of the residence. Bearberry down in here, beach grass, obviously beach plum. Some big blue stem was included. That's native as well. So here's some of the junipers. This is on the south side of the residence, where some of the non-natives are included, but it's mostly for screening purposes and doesn't include a majority of that revegetation.
So overall, you're pretty satisfied with that?
Yeah, we were satisfied with the revegetation. We didn't feel it needed any significant changes, but did want to bring it to the board just to see if it was okay.
Board members, have any questions?
Yeah, what is this? Is this a modification? Because
No, this is just, they just came in for a certificate of occupancy, and it was different enough from what the board approved that we wanted to bring it to you to say, yes, it's okay for a CO.
So changing the lot coverage, but this isn't what our decision said.
The survey, the as-built survey and the approved survey differ in coverage slightly, by about 67 square feet, I suppose. But we can't tell, it doesn't, they're no closer to the dune crest. I don't know, we don't know where the discrepancy came up with. It's probably just a few inches here and there that caused a slight change in that coverage number.
I kind of remember that project. I thought there was something odd about it to begin with. Shouldn't it be a modification? I probably should have, but at this point.
I think we were comfortable that it's so minor that, if the board's okay with it, we can just sign off on a CO at this point.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay, want to make a motion?
Yeah. In the matter of Heidi Ho's Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-85-1-6 at 212 Shore Road, Amagansett, I make a motion to okay the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Concur. I concur.
Concur, thank you. Next, we have the draft minutes of September 19th.
Yes, I did look at them. And I make a motion to approve the minutes for September 19th, 2023. For East Hampton Town Zoning Board of Appeal. Second. Concur.
Concur, thank you. Then we have resolutions this night. This evening, we have Robin Katz at 69 Isle of Wight Road in Spring, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-23-2-28.
Yes, I'm actually looking at my photos, which I'm having a brain freeze on this. I think this application was, I did read the decision, I just don't have the, I think it was for the extension of a deck. And I know it was a unanimous approval. Has everybody read the decision? Okay. I was fine with it, so I'm gonna just make a motion. In the matter of the application of Robin Katz, 69 Isle of Wight Road in Springs, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-23-2-28, I make a motion we accept the determination as written. Second.
Concur, thank you. Next, we have Gabjack's Manor and LLC at 155 Westlake Drive in Montauk, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-19-7-28.6.
Okay, this one was mine. If you recall, 155 Westlake Drive, the application was for pool and various decking. This is the application that had a shed and the fence partially encroaching on the scenic easements. Overall, this was a unanimous denial of the application for the pool and the decking, approval for the applicant to move the fencing outside of the scenic easement with a 50-foot variance approval for the wetlands for the fencing, and the shed is to be removed. So for Gabjack's Manor LLC at 155 Westlake Drive in Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-19-7-28.6, make a motion to approve the determination as written. Second. Concur.
Concur. Thank you. Next, we have Wallace and Delaney at 82 Fleming Road, Montauk, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-17-1-10.
This was mine. This was an application about a cottage that sat on the shore of Fort Pond Bay. It was sitting 23 feet from the crest of the dune. We talked about the bluff crest. They proposed to make some additions to the property, and they were all in line with a previous approval, a 2016 approval, except for the fact that they were asking to lower the basement floor to get more headroom in a very tight space. We were in concurrence on this. Did somebody decide to vote against the basement?
No, I think we wanted a condition that
It couldn't be,
wouldn't be livable space.
the conditions couldn't be living space, but I think we were in a.
But I think that is the reason I did approve it.
Okay, so we're all in agreement. So I'd like to make a motion then in the resolution of Wallace and Delaney, 82 Fleming Road, Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-17-1-10, to accept the determination as written.
Second.
Concur.
Concur, thank you. All right, that's going to wrap up our meeting for tonight, Matt, and we're going to close the meeting and then go into executive session to discuss a legal matter. So Vice Chair, could you make that motion?
I will, thank you. I'd like to make a motion then to close the Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing for September 26th, 2023, and go move immediately into executive session at 9:58 p.m.
Second.
Concur. I concur.